And good.
I'd like to convene the board meeting, regular meeting of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District Board of Directors at 7:18 on March 21st, 2023. Roll call, please.
Dr. Bernstein,
Present.
Dr. Bloom,
Here.
Dr. Jones,
Here.
Dr. Crowley, President, Dr. Solano.
Here.
If we can stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The United States. Hello. Stands. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I will now open up public comment number 1. So this is for any members of the public who would like to make a public comment on items that are not on the agenda. This is your time to do so. If you have public comment in your in Zoom land, please feel free to raise your hand or press *9 so that our board clerk Michelle can call on you. So Michelle,
We have no public comments.
so seeing that there are no public comments for public comment number 1, I will close public comment number 1. And well, actually, I should say that there are no reportable items in closed session by at this point. So out of closed session, and this for your patients, there are no reportable items out of closed session. So let's go to the chief report. Mark.
Thank you, Director Crawley, and members of the board and members of our community that are out there listening, and to our employees also. Happy to share with you what's been going on with the organization for the last month. COVID impacts have been relatively light. We've had a couple employee positives, which is just kind of becoming norm now. No impacts to our district operations, no impacts with our ambulance wall times, et cetera. So no real, nothing of significance there. Station 4 update. So Station 4 is open, which is great. We had some issues at this time last month as we were trying to move into it right in the middle of a pretty ginormous storm. Station's open. Engine 4 is now in there. What used to be truck 1 is now truck 4, and they are in the station also. Next steps, we're waiting for the ground to dry. So there's currently some issues with just compaction and trying to prepare it for the hardscape. So what's likely done is as soon as, and then we also have to get some service from PG&E there. Obviously, PG&E has been pretty taxed, as we all know, over this last month. So we're waiting on some service from PG&E. As soon as that's done, it's about a 3.5 month time from start to finish for them to do the demo on the house, put in all hardscape, and for us to move forward with the grand opening. So again, grand opening sometime in summer, which will be great. It'll be beautiful weather, hopefully also. And we'll open that to the public and all of our employees, and it'll be a great celebration. Just some updates on what's going on in our recruitment calendar. Senior management analysts, we've done initial interviews with HR manager and community volunteer coordinator. Those positions have both been filled. The assistant fire marshal is currently open right now. So that's it on our kind of update of what's going on with our recruitment. Promotions. On March 16th, we made 3 promotions off of our new captains list. We promoted Brett Bates, Scott Bassett, and Daryl Payne all into the positions of fire captains. So really exciting times for us and for these new individuals that are company officers, and to always talk to them about the weight of the badge and the weight of the responsibility that comes with moving up through the ranks. So really exciting times for us. Other items, we had a retiree lunch. We have a quarterly kind of standing lunch at blanking on the name of the place in Redwood City, but we always gather up there. Really good to see retirees. We were able to bring out one of the new engines and share it with them. They were all, as you can imagine, remarking at the size of these things compared to what they all grew up on. So, good lunch. Always good to see our retirees and keep them connected. We have a new East Palo Alto city manager, Melvin Gaines. Has been there for about 3 weeks. I met with him, I think last week. Really great to have that stability there. City Manager Gaines is a longtime resident of East Palo Alto, so really good having a conversation with him. I will talk about it, well, I might as well talk about it now. I'm working with the city manager on establishing a joint meeting for us. He said he was gonna check in with his mayor and vice mayor and then get back to us, and once we're at that point, our clerk of the board, Michelle Canier, will work with theirs in establishing a mutually convenient time. Peninsula Volunteers, I had that item on there. Artemis Wrong, their COO, reached out to me, so I went over and did a tour of the Little House. Great facility. Chatted with them about their Meals on Wheels program. I'm gonna do a ride along with one of their volunteers on that, and we'll be attending the Champions Breakfast. I think it's this Thursday. Just looking at opportunities for us to connect with our volunteer community will be great. Back to the hiring of Heather Keller as our community volunteer coordinator, starting to introduce her to all of our connections and help her start establishing relationships. So that would be great. Incidents. So this incidents, even though I had the wind rain event for March, that I don't have any other significant incidents. That all by itself was pretty significant, as we all know. 2 weeks ago, we had a pretty significant incident with weather and power outages. We had staffed up quite a few resources internally for us here, additional engines, our Swiftwater rescue team. We ended up, just related to that Swiftwater team, just to bring the board up to speed, there ended up not being a significant need with flooding here. Most of our issues were trees down, power lines down, things like that. So they were repositioned and deployed down into Monterey County. For those of you that were watching the news where the levee broke just outside of Watsonville in the community of Carajo, our Swiftwater team was in there, and they said it was basically chaos and bedlam, and they, Chief Coyle reported out the next morning that they probably had at least 20 legitimate water rescues. That's removing people from homes, and really challenging environment there, but really valuable to have that resource there. It was very helpful for that community. Then they moved them up and they staged a position in Morgan Hill for a while. They've now moved the team into Tulare, where they're anticipating some significant rain and runoff, et cetera. So we've swapped out some crew members already. All of that related to our Swiftwater rescue team is all being reimbursed by OES. We don't have any issues right now with really the rain as much as we do the wind, which brings us into kind of today's status. We stood up resources in anticipation of the winds that were coming in today. As everybody experienced, we had some power outages. There was a period of time when we went into what we call high call volume mode. That's where the dispatch center in Redwood City elevates their calls. They could start prioritizing, just the very critical calls. And what we did at the same time in this weather incident and our last one 2 weeks ago is we stood up what we're calling our DOC, our Department Operations Center. What that allows us to do is deal with just emergency operations in the organization. And really the primary purpose of our DOC in those two instances was to take that overload or overflow of calls from PSC, our dispatch center. These are the low priority calls, pull them in to our DOC. And as resources are freed up and available for lower emergent calls, they dispatch them out. So take some of that pressure off of the Public Safety Communication Center in Redwood City and allows us then to help prioritize some of those calls. So that DOC was active from probably about noon until they stood it down during our closed session as everything subsided. But A really good process, really helpful for our community. And helps us, try and respond to the calls with the most urgent needs. One other item, just kind of an update on community meetings, our Menlo Park. Not community meeting, joint meeting with the boards. Michelle Canier is working with their their clerk of the board, finding a mutually convenient time. And then Atherton, which we probably met with, I don't know, it's probably about 10 months ago. I'm meeting with George Rodericks and a couple of other people on ADAP on next Thursday. So I'll start the conversation with him about trying to reschedule our next meeting. With that, that's the end of my fire chief's comments. Were there any questions?
Chuck?
I have several, I was curious about COVID pay. Have we now discontinued special pay for COVID?
Yeah.
Okay, because the state eliminated, I think, the
Yeah.
1st of January.
We did the same at the same time.
Thank you. The second thing is, maybe this is, well, it's you, Chief, or possibly Stephen. There was an issue maybe 6 months ago or a year ago or something about what we could do with luncheons and things like that in terms of the expenditures and whether they were permissible or not. What is the status now to have luncheons with a group, like the Christmas luncheon or the holiday luncheon or the retiring luncheon and so forth?
I'm not familiar with, I'm familiar with luncheon. I didn't know that the question had been asked about whether it was
So it came
permissible.
up that the district could not pay for it for some reason, or something.
I'm not familiar with that. We paid for the Christmas luncheon, so.
Well, that's what I'm asking, because that seemed like a change, so I was
Yeah.
curious.
Okay, well, I will get together with the chief and we'll get back to you next on that. I mean, there are reportable gift issues that have to do in part with how these are accounted for, but let me get together with the chief and we'll get back to you.
Okay, sounds like we're not the answer publicly, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you. I do have a third question then, and that is, about this district department operations center, is that correct? Two things, do the calls come directly to that, or do they get routed from Redwood City over to it?
That's a great question, and it sounds grander than it is. It's actually Chief Coyle's office, and they cobbled together a radio system, so it comes in, basically all the calls still come in through the Public Safety Dispatch Center, right? They get put into a queue with lower priority calls. They have access, when I say they, the people that are in our DOC have access to those calls, and so they grab them. So it's a combination of telephone, radio, and what's in tablet command. So, but once we grab the call, the Public Safety Communication Center removes it from their queue, and it's all the responsibility of ours from that point. So,
And do we then have to get back to them about the disposition?
no, we don't have to get, they just assume once we take it, we've got it, we will take it to its resolution, and then we'll fill out all the appropriate paperwork on, the response, the resolution, et cetera, just like we would do with a regular call.
But I didn't partially answer my second question about it, which was who was answering those calls, but it was only Chief Coyle?
No, so today, in Chief Coyle's office, because Chief Coyle is off on vacation, was Chief McDonald, Chief Johnston, Janie, who works at our front desk, and then I saw Kenny Babcock, one of our battalion chiefs that came in off duty to help. So there's 4 people in there kind of managing those calls, tracking them, prioritizing them, and then dispatching resources as they came available.
Can they take 4 at a time, or these are 4 people alternating?
I don't know what the individuals, somebody's a scribe, somebody's on the radio, somebody's answering the phone, so. There's no problem with them bringing the calls in and logging them. Our challenge is really availability of resources, right? Because everybody's busy, so they can monitor available resources on our tablet command app and see when if engine 4 frees up and there's not an emergent call in the queue, they can assign engine 4 to a public service call, if we want to call it that, a tree down, wires down. things
So
like that.
we probably aren't set up at this point to do that, but let's say there was a disaster and the communication center disappeared in Redwood City, could we have the ability somehow, and I know it would take more work,
Right.
to route calls directly to us at some point? If that.
At some point, yeah, we're not, you know, if ESC went down in an earthquake, you know, I'm not exactly sure what the exact procedure would be, but I know there's a plan in place for direct lines of communications with our radio system here. We were talking about that just, 2 days ago, so. It is possible. I don't think it's, set up yet in a robust enough way. But, so more to come on that. But there was that conversation there, that's right, I had that conversation with Chief Johnston also about setting up a couple of these, you know, I don't want to call them DOCs, but something similar to that at 3 of our fire stations so that hams could come in. We could, you know, basically set up area command where we could, you know, basically just function on our own, because that's what's gonna happen there.
Chief,
Yes.
since Chuck mentioned it, did we get administrative rights to SMC alert? Do we have administrative rights?
No, basically, we have to ask permission, you know, we can make a request for,
But we don't have it now.
no, we can't go in and just cause something to go out, that would have to go through DEM.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Chuck? Any other questions?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
No.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, item 2, presentation. This is for the management audit presentation, and I think that AP Triton online, is that correct?
Got it. I will, once you call up Ken Kemna.
Yes,
Yeah,
can you hear me okay?
we can hear you, we can't see you yet or see your screen, so stand by, Ken.
Okay.
So just for background, this was a management audit rule study that was commissioned by the board or Gary. So this is the review of the results of the numerous interviews and data that AP Triton looked at. So just for members of the public who don't understand why we ended up doing this, we were voted on
Yeah.
to do it, just to get an idea of what's happening within the fire district.
So if I can read up, or I still refer to him as Chief Kemna, but I've known the chief for quite a while, from before he retired and failed retirement. And used to be the fire chief for Santa Clara County. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir.
And I went up to Washington and now has failed retirement a third time as consultant to AP Triton. And is going to kind of guide us through findings and recommendations tonight, and we'll see where it goes from there. I know he has some staff on also available, should there be specific questions that we can't answer. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Ken. Thank you.
Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Lawrence, and good to see you again. And really enjoyed working with you and all of your team. Thank you, President Shankarali and Vice President Bloom and members of the board. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to you this evening. As the chief said, my name is Ken Kemna. Yes, I have failed retirement a couple of times. I was the fire chief just south of you there for a while in Santa Clara County. So it's nice to be able to work with some folks from back home. Great to see you all. There are several members of our team here tonight. Originally, Michelle Fitzer was going to do this presentation. She was the project manager for your management audit. Unfortunately, she had a death in the family of a close friend. So she had to leave unexpectedly. And so I told her that I would take the presentation for her. So I'm the business unit leader for the administrative services unit for AP Triton. So Michelle's project and your project fell into my shop. And so I'm going to step up and I'm going to do the presentation tonight. We do have several members of the team, the project team here with us tonight. We don't have everybody, unfortunately. I wish we did, but we do have several members. So if there are specific questions, they are online and available to answer any questions you might have. As Chief Lauritsen said in his primer email that he had sent out, It is a fairly lengthy presentation. I'm going to do as best a job I can to keep this thing moving fairly quickly so that we don't get too long into the evening. I'm going to do sort of a high flight through the project and go over all of the findings and recommendations. And there's a significant number of them, so it's going to take us a little while, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions or have team members answer any questions as we go along. Before we get started, are there any questions I can answer?
Chief, yeah, please continue.
What type of format, Virginia, do you want this? You want it by section or by?
I don't, so it's pretty long. So Chief, what do you think is the best use of your time and also allowing the board members and even members of the public, if they have questions, to ask the questions? Because it's a very long report. It's very comprehensive.
Yeah.
You interrupt the flow, but then we don't want to forget the questions either.
Yeah, not a problem. I'll tell you what, let's do this. It is really long. I mean, there's 97 findings and 84 recommendations in the report. And that's really a synopsis of a much larger report. As you have all seen, the actual report is in excess of 300 pages, so it's fairly lengthy. But there are some areas where I think it's going to be appropriate to ask questions, and I think it's appropriate to just ask them at that time. Chief Lorenzen, if we start to get a little long, just kind of give me the thumbs up, and we'll try and keep things moving along if you don't mind. Once I share the presentation, I don't think I'll be able to see all of you, but I should be able to hear fine. Okay.
Does that help? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So please feel free to ask questions as they come up.
And I think, Director, you'll find, I don't know, Ken, what your slides look like, but as he goes through the slides, there's not a super clear delineation like there is in the report with each individual section,
We'll
so.
play it by ear. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Chief.
All right. Can everybody see the presentation? Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So back in November 2021, the district issued a request for proposal for an outside firm to conduct a management audit of the district's support operations. The audit was to include an assessment of district management practices and related policies, protocols, and processes. In January of 2022, the Menlo Park Fire Protection District contracted with AP Triton to perform this project.
Ken,
Yes, sir.
just so you're aware, we're seeing what is page 4 of the actual report. We're not seeing your PowerPoint slides.
Oh, my apologies. Let me make sure that I'm sharing the correct screen here. Let me try this again. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Oh, no, so there are corrections that are going to be made to that page.
I don't think I know it.
Or make changes.
There,
No.
I caught, yeah.
No, it's great.
For some reason,
Should be good.
it's not allowing me to get back to the screen share page here. Give me 1 second. I apologize for this.
Perfect.
Better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. All right, where did we leave off here? Okay, so the intent of our project was to evaluate industry standards and best practices, compare those to the district's existing policies, protocols, and processes, determine whether existing policies, protocols, and processes support the published strategic plan, identify any gaps, and provide recommendations to be implemented or improved in order to conform to industry best standards. Excluded from the project was an assessment of actual suppression or prevention activities. The board's clear interest was in the overall management of the district operations and really not the direct provision of emergency services. Based on these factors, the report provides a high-level assessment of district management, including the board. As I said, we had a fairly large project team. We had 8 subject matter experts, 6 of which are with us tonight. We conducted a number of interviews back in July of 2022. We interviewed boards of directors. We interviewed chief officers, administrative managers, representatives from IFF and AFSCME, and non-sworn personnel as well. Getting stakeholder input is absolutely a critical part of any one of these processes, and it was an extremely valuable experience. What you have in front of you is a comprehensive review of district policies and procedures, board policies and procedures, as well as operational policies, protocols, and processes. As I mentioned, it is fairly lengthy. We do have 97 findings and 84 recommendations. There is some redundancy, though, as we go through this, and I'll try and move fairly quickly if I can for you. As I said, we do stakeholder input. Now, this is absolutely critical. The stakeholder input piece is key because it gives us the perspective of the people within the organization or sometimes outside the organization, how they view the service and the service that's being provided. This is really putting your voice in the work. As a consultant, as a fire chief, I can certainly come in and do the analysis and I can do the work. But it's really important to work with you so that your voice is a part of this report. This is your report, your organization. It's really critical that we have this piece for us. During the stakeholder input phase, it's sort of broken down into 2 categories. The first is current critical issues. These are identified as items needing immediate attention, and these are not listed in any particular order. The district is lacking a formally adopted strategic plan and overall organizational guide. Now, we'll talk about the strategic plan quite a bit tonight, but we'll just leave that there for now. A revised organizational chart is needed. Positions need to be filled in with regular and not acting persons, and responsibilities need to be clearly delineated. The organization is also lacking a succession plan. Some board members will attempt to be involved in operational matters, directing staff rather than performing their own statutory role as a policymaker. The organization lacks staff diversity. There is a need for improving the financial tracking, reporting, and transparency and accountability for the organization. Board members do not always follow their own policies and procedures, interaction with fellow board members and staff. The organization needs to ensure for the safety of line personnel. And the organization needs to evaluate the number of programs the district provides and or is involved in. The district clearly needs the ability to produce analytic data regarding programs and services provided, and also provide checks and balances for all financial aspects of operations, and provide essential communications via social media, both and traditional media outlets. And finally, implementing and or improving various operational software systems. Our next category is future challenges. These are challenges that the district should be planning to address in the near future. These are things that we're sort of looking out into the future about. These, again, are not in order of importance. We need to ensure the district is right-sized for future growth within the service area. We need to address the issue of traffic congestion. I don't think it comes as a surprise to anybody. That's a significant issue affecting response times. We need to address emergency preparedness, fiscal sustainability, and long-range financial planning. Somehow incentivizing staff to reside within the fire district, given the high cost of living in the area. We need to balance workload and working relationships between labor and management. We need a strategy for using and or selling land the district currently owns, also looking for alternate sites for future facilities. Need to ensure that communities served are recognized, represented, and feel heard. And we need to build strong relationships with our elected and appointed officials from member agencies within the district. Need to do an ongoing assessment and improvement plan for all functional areas of the district. And facing all of us in the fire service is recruitment and retention of the next generation of fire service personnel. What I'm going to do now is we're going to go through project findings and recommendations. I did a little bit of work on the presentation today to try and make this flow a little bit better for you. There are arguably a few more slides than we would like there to be, but I wanted to make sure that we didn't have too much information on the screen so that you're forced to try and read the information as quickly as you can. I minimized that for you, but we're going to go through it in different chunks. So we're going to go through it by subject area. Starting off, these are project findings and recommendation in the general category. Under findings, the strategic plan appears to be a work in progress. Strategic plan does not appear to have been vetted at any public meeting, nor was it adopted by the board. Many of the stakeholders we interviewed were actually unaware of the strategic plan. They were unable to explain if or how a strategic plan, if integrated, if it was in fact in place, was being integrated into daily operations. A focus of the audit was to determine whether the district's policies, protocols, and processes were supportive of the objectives outlined in the strategic plan objectives. Unfortunately, a number of staff were unaware of the strategic plan, so this was notable. Given this, it appears that management is not operating in a manner intended to conform with the existing strategic plan. Our recommendation is the district should undertake a comprehensive strategic planning process where key components are outlined in the report. And you'll see those as we go. Several areas within operations are either lacking in policies, procedures, and protocols, or in desperate need of updating. Our recommendation is the district should undertake a review of policies, protocols, and processes to determine where policies are missing or in need of updating. The size and structure of the organization was deemed to be appropriate given the district's operational scope. An area of concern is the number of specialty programs the district currently operates. Stakeholders reported not being able to really fully understand the decision-making process or most appropriate level within the organization to make certain decisions. We understand Chief Lorenzen is implementing changes to the organizational structure, and that's likely to address several of these items, and that was mentioned by quite a few stakeholders. The district does an outstanding job providing fire suppression and fire prevention services to the community. The district is well-funded, well-staffed, and well-equipped. The district is highly regarded for their urban search and rescue program. I have to say it would be impossible to have grown up in California or the Bay Area specifically and not fully understand Menlo Park's urban search and rescue program.
Virginia?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Chief, may I call you Chief?
Oh, you can call me Ken, that's fine.
No. Okay. I didn't see a definition, glossary or area here in the report, defining certain terminology, certain wording. Is there anything that we need to review relative to some of the definitions relative to like what you use in the recommendations?
I would say that 90% of this report, for those of us in the industry, the vernacular is common enough and the acronyms are common enough that there should not need to be a lot of effort given to finding definitions for terms. There are a couple of things that we will mention in the report that frankly, some folks might need a little bit of information, understand. We're going to talk about, when we talk about IT, we're going to talk about value chain. And there are IT professionals on the board, so I'm not going to butcher that in front of you and make a fool out of myself. But there are things like that might need a little more explanation. But other than that, the vast majority of the information in terms in the report and in the presentation don't require any special definitions for you. If there is anything, please stop me though, and I'm more than happy to explain. And if additional clarification in the report needs to be made, I'm happy to see that is done as well.
Yeah, hey, Ken, can I ask you a question? It's Gary Bloom.
Yes, sir.
I'm curious, just when you're doing a study like this, what is the calibration process your organization goes through to calibrate it for a district of this size? Because I would expect that if you were evaluating LA City County Fire, Orange County Fire versus Menlo Park Fire District, you would have a different set of expectations. So I'm just kind of curious how your process calibrates for the size district we are, how many suppression people we have, you know, and so forth. That's
an excellent question. And the management audit is really just sort of one of the types of studies that AP Triton will do. And it's an entire team of fire service professionals, HR professionals, city managers, and the like. And we do a number of these style of reports. We also do standards of cover and community risk analysis and those kinds of things. All of them are measured against industry best standards, and they're measured against standards that are national standards for response times, turnout time, call processing times, and those kinds of things. When it comes to things relative to the size of the organization, most of us have worked on projects for a wide variety of organizations, all the way from single station organizations to fully volunteer organizations, all the way up to and including LA County, LA City, and Orange County. So we have a breadth of experience with many different size organizations. Most of us come from medium-sized organizations, so we have that type of experience in our own background. So we benchmark it against our own knowledge of the industry standard. And industry standards such as the NFPA and the Commission on Fire Accreditation International Standards, which you'll hear more about later.
Virginia, may I ask
Yeah,
for
please.
verification? Ken, when I was talking about a definition section or a glossary section, just in the organization overview, you talk about the Menlo Park Fire Protection District operates under a board of directors / fire chief governance model. Is that the California Special Districts Authority where the board is the authority and the chief, well, the board delegates their authority to the chief in his role as fire chief? Is that what you meant here? That's why I was asking about glossary terms.
Oh, my apologies. So you're talking about something that was in the actual report, not in the presentation.
Yeah, that's why I asked about, you know, certain word and that were used.
Yes, sir.
And, yeah, if you could explain that to me, is that what you meant here?
Yes, sir. My apologies. So in terms of your question is in regards to the definition of the board and the governance model?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's so that the board, the elected officials have the ultimate authority and responsibility under state of California laws and regulations. And they delegate that authority to the picking of the fire chief, which is what our model is. Is that what you meant here in that paragraph?
Yes, sir. That is 100% correct.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies for the misunderstanding.
Okay. You said the same thing, Ken.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, ma'am.
Yeah, continue, please.
Okay. Moving on to project findings and recommendations under communications. District communications at all levels were described as high or a very high priority by stakeholders. Stakeholders provided several opportunities for improvement. This will be sort of a laundry list of just opportunities for improvement. Clearly identify the board's expected improvements to communications from staff. Provide the necessary resources to write consistent, high-quality board reports. Board requests for staff should come through the fire chief and clearly articulate the desired outcome in sufficient detail for successful completion. Ensure the board adheres to board policies. Policy 1.2 and 2.2 were referenced specifically, confining scope of work and meeting discussions to the formulation and evaluation of policy. Create a policy on how to inform and disseminate to staff information that is both timely and accurate. Replace the current silo mentality with one of collaboration among divisions.
Ken,
Yes, ma'am.
and so I have actually highlighted sections like based on your recommendations here. But as I went through this, so just out of curiosity, I actually thought that this recommendation of, kind of getting away from this silo mentality is important, not just for our organization, but for any other organization. I mean, so how prevalent was this during the time you were doing the fact finding? Because you're saying that we should articulate a compelling vision or a big picture, for public safety, identify strategic goals, et cetera. And I mean, during this time when we're dealing with contract negotiation, for example, we probably need to look at the bigger picture instead of the silo, keeping in that silo mentality. So I mean, how pervasive was this during your findings? It seems to me, as a layperson, that it's definitely a strong organizational challenge.
It is, and if I can, I'd like to defer to some of the AP Triton subject matter experts that we have with us in the meeting tonight, who were actually, Dr. Pat Lynch, who was on the call with us tonight. She was actually on site and spoke with a number of the stakeholders. So if she's available to answer the question, I'd like to have her chime in.
If you don't mind, if the board's okay with that.
Yeah, I haven't checked them in long.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great, Pat, if she's here.
I can't unmute myself.
Oh, there you go, Pat. We can hear you.
Okay, here we go. Okay, if you wouldn't mind, please, I'm having a little difficulty hearing when the directors are speaking. So I'm not quite certain of what your question is. So if you could just help me out here, then I'll be glad to answer it.
Ken, I don't know if she can hear you. You better, I don't know if she can hear me very well.
I'm happy to restate it for you.
Okay.
She might be able to hear you better.
Yeah, Dr. Lynch, the question was about the question of siloing. The question was, how prevalent was the discussion about the silo culture in the Menlo Park Fire Protection District? Did that come up a lot?
Almost everybody brought it up in terms of personnel. I'm not certain. I don't recall that the board of directors we spoke with, that the directors we spoke with spoke of it. However, as I say, it, almost everybody mentioned that term in particular. So that was not our term. That is one that apparently is used throughout the organization, very prevalent.
Yeah, Chuck.
This is Chuck Bernstein. I wanted to ask a related question, and I guess you kind of confirmed that the board really didn't discuss this very much. I understand in general what the concept of a silo is, but could you tell me what the silos were in general? Is this like a fire station as a silo, or fleet maintenance is a cycle, is a silo, or what were the silos?
Yes, sir. They are basically the departments that each department kind of works autonomously, if you will, and they don't mix easily with other departments. So it is a tendency to stay within your department, even when there are cross-functional activities. And we use the example in the report of payroll. Other people outside of HR and payroll must provide the data in order for the payroll process to work. And that doesn't always work smoothly. So it is almost like a competition sometimes among the departments in terms of what they do and how they do it. So basically, it is departments.
Thank you.
Robert?
Yeah, I think I might be on the wrong, different page, but I'm looking at recommendation number 4. And you talked about in this report, it indicated that to ensure the board adhere to board policy, and then you, which is 1.2. And then you wanted to say that, I guess policy 2.2, which has to do with job description. You said, you indicated that by combining its scope of work and meeting discussions to formulation and evaluation of policy. Then your note said on your description, it talked about having expressed concern, there were some interviews, including board members, have expressed concerns and frustration over what they describe as board tendency to address issues that are operational and administrative rather than sticking to their designated policy role. So could you explain to me or give me an idea of, I assume that you read it, the board policy 2.2, and also I guess 1.2. The 1.2 is talking about adopting governing by policy. And what are you making reference to there?
Thank you, Director. That people were basically talking about the fact that they experienced the board as getting into operational issues. They also explained that, you know, with the previous fire chief, sometimes that was necessary. So he was out of commission for a while, we understood, and that the board kind of stepped in and started making some decisions. After that time, however, your personnel reported that they felt that board members were overstepping their policy role and getting into operational areas. So that's what the context is here, sir.
And the outcomes, you mentioned about outcomes. And one of them, talked about a board that leads by example. And that their high degree of confidence that board members behavior is consistent with their establishing policy. What does that really mean?
Almost without exception, the people we interviewed, including members of the board of directors, indicated that behaviors during board meetings are not always consistent with the policies that the board has set out in the board of directors policy document. And they are concerned that the fact that this policy or these policies are being violated is problematic. They believe that it sets a bad example for the personnel. And they also are concerned that because your meetings are recorded and available to the public, that it kind of puts the district in a bad light. And so they suggest, and you know, many of them suggested, almost everybody mentioned it. And many people suggested that the board follow its policies with respect to how they treat one another.
Thank you. I'm gonna give other people a help. Go ahead.
I have just a quick question, actually, with regard to recommendations 4 and 7.
What page?
I'm sorry, I'm on page 26 of the actual report.
22.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, I don't have,
That's okay, I got it.
I have it on, I actually have the study of the report on my computer. So for number 7, because I was very bothered by this silo mentality. Do you get the feeling that the board adds to that mentality? Based on your recommendation number 4?
Okay, just to be clear, I'm not looking at the recommendations. I'm just seeing what's on the screen. Based on what you've said, though, Director, it did not come up. The silo mentality does not, was not a term used with respect to the board. It was,
I know that. I'm talking about, do you think that the silo mentality is a result of possible board being involved with operations too much?
No, ma'am, I did not get that impression at all.
Okay, yeah, I was just thinking of efficiencies that might be needed for number 7, the silo, getting past the silo mentality. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Robert?
For one other question, maybe two. In your same recommendation on the communication, recommendation number 5, you talked about that, to ensure board members interact with each other in ways that are consistent with board policy number, our board policy number 5.4. And it's labeled board member decorum. And also 5.9, which is board members' conduct and responsibility. The description that you described as training interviewees, including board members, expressed a great deal of concern about the directors frequently speak to and or treat each other during their public meetings. And you go on to say that they indicate that there have been a wide range of negative reactions to these exchanges. And you noted that because videos of the board meetings are posted on the district website, there is also concern that such behavior reflects poorly on the district as a whole. And you talked about setting that they set a bad example for the district personnel. Did that kind of relate back to what your opening statement about board, how its conduct and its relationship with the public?
Yes, it is, sir.
Could you maybe, if you can recall, elaborate a little bit more about, this expressed a great deal of concern about the directors frequently speaking to and treating others. In terms of how that relates to the community, but can you elaborate a little bit about how that interacts on the board, how that interaction reflects amongst the board members?
What we heard from personnel, and again, including some of the members of the board of directors, concerns about unprofessional behavior, about rudeness, about really uncivil behavior toward one another during your meetings that are recorded and available to the public. And it greatly disturbs personnel based on the numbers of times that we heard this information. Of the 23 interviews that we conducted, all but 3 of them were individuals, and then 3 of them were focus groups. 3, actually 2 of them. So there, that number of people were the number of people who brought this up. And they, to us, it indicated when there's such consistency across the district in terms of behaviors, then there is something there that should be addressed.
Would you say that could, in and of itself, find itself impacting morale, both on the board as well as with staff?
Yes, sir. I would say yes to both. As I say, we did hear from some of you. I think we talked to all the directors at that time. And I won't say everybody brought it up, it was brought up by some of the directors. And as I say, throughout the personnel, they feel embarrassed that, they're working for a district and here we have, a board of directors who are acting inappropriately, unprofessionally, however, they described them in a number of different ways, as did the directors. And so, yes, they are embarrassed by it and they are not happy about it. They feel it reflects on them as people who work for the district.
One last question I have, if I may. And it's in recommendation number 16, you indicated that consider. Okay.
Yeah.
Go
Gave us that response after.
ahead.
So, yeah, Gary.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna come back to Robert's question just from where you're at in the presentation versus where his next question is. But I actually had another kind of process question, maybe for Ken, which is essentially, is there an as of date on this report? In other words, at what point did your team stop collecting input and start writing the report, drawing conclusions? Rough time frame because we had a chief change, we've had a lot of change. You're tuning in moving targets. I'm not trying to criticize it. But
No.
all you're shooting at a moving target, but kind of when was the target, kind of data collection stopped?
Yeah, that is,
Yeah.
that is an outstanding question. So the way we kick off the project is we kick off with asking you for as much data and information as we can about your organization so you give us all of the information that we need to analyze the organization. We go through all the data and we start to put together our opinions on our report. We start to do our analysis and start to come up with what sort of a working document. It's when we come on site that we do our stakeholder interviews and we actually have a chance to come on site, meet with you and with your staff. That's the timestamp. That is the period in time where we say, okay, things are going to change after we leave here. But now that we've done the analysis, we've gathered the information, we've come on site, we've actually done the interviews and talked to stakeholders. That's the snapshot in time with which we have to begin writing the report. The challenge we run into is, especially, an organization like yours, they're very dynamic. Change is always occurring. The fire chief is always doing things to make changes in the organization, and substantial changes already happened in Menlo Park. So for us to keep pace with that, we'd really never be able to finish the report if we didn't timestamp it. So really, that is the moment when we come on site, that's the timestamp.
And what was that rough timestamp for this?
Would have been July of 2022.
Thank you.
Okay,
Great question.
thank you. Yeah, you wanted, Rob, yeah.
No, Ken, you mentioned communication relative to radios.
Mhm.
And we just spent how much, chief, on new radios and new communication systems?
1.2 million.
Yeah, so, I don't know if this is reflected, relative to the improvement that we did with the roll system, correct, chief?
It's
it
not,
after
it's
July?
not reflected.
Yeah, it was.
So there you go.
Yeah, it was after July.
Yeah.
So that was identified, which a lot of us on the board did identify that as an issue with dead spots. So, good job on that. But, Blue makes a really good point of that start date is really important.
And I think what you'll find, and the next steps will be probably some conversation after Ken's done with the presentation, but my plan is to go through all the recommendations and actually kind of give a report card on where we are. Yeah, it was the challenge with me too, is as Ken alluded to, there's a lot of change going on during the time of this, and so, like you said, the snapshot, we've addressed the radio issues, almost wholly, but not all the way, but so you'll get a report back on those things, probably a solid 30 or 40% of the recommendation already have significant progress.
Okay, so Ken, if we
Thank
can
you,
get back,
Chief.
thanks, Rob. If we can get back to recommendation 8, I think that's where you left off.
You got it. You can still see the presentation?
Yes.
All right, so opportunities for improvement, we're still working through those. Let's see, I'll just start at the top here in case I might repeat myself here, but review HR practices related to communicating information to employees, such as policies or benefits, deadlines specifically. That was something that was mentioned, people not really getting, understanding the information that they were getting about their benefits and deadlines for certain items. Providing training on how to engage in difficult conversations, and this is a big one, providing ongoing training to future supervisors and administrators on how to do their job. Assessing the effectiveness of Telesap and ADP systems, something we're all having fun with these days. Utilizing clear, unambiguous language in labor agreements, always a challenge. Develop a process to request and track facilities related repairs, and update the fire district's website.
So can I, because I know that under 16 is lower, but the opportunities for improvement from this other, that's above the set here, I'm sorry. I want to get back to the HR pieces, to your opportunities for improvement, and
Okay.
I'm specifically looking at the recommendation 8 and pretty much anything that has to do with HR practices, including, well, obviously, these are the communications, but so the district, ever since I've been on this board, which is now about 12 years, has had HR issues and challenges, and some would say problematic. And your report actually highlights some, I think, important issues. If you look at, I broke your report down for me in terms of being able to process this in my own way. I really looked at a lot of the administrative pieces, right? And the HR was one of them. So, not 8, I'm sorry, number 9, sorry, recommendation 9. So the fire, so what? I mean, I think that you have some good suggestions for outcomes, but from what I have seen in the past, there seems to be a lack of checks and balances for actual, like, good customer service internal for our internal customers, which is basically our personnel, right? So do you think that, what kind of checks and balances do you think should actually be involved? And I know it might be a loaded question, and it might be a solution that you don't have, or a question you don't have the answer to. But I mean, it sounds like checks and balances might be in order here. I mean, I don't, do you see that in other fire departments? Because the suppression staff is like the main star, but there are so many other staff members that support the suppression staff that need the same kind of HR support.
Yeah, well, so we're still fairly early in the presentation. We are going to get deeper into HR later. So what I want to do, since Dr. Lynch did a lot of work in that area too, I'm going to ask her to speak to that maybe a little bit later if I can. But one of the things I want to touch on is the point that the question you just asked is, do we see this in other organizations? And I would say absolutely we do. And I think part of the reason why we do is the function of human resources and the level of sophistication that human resources requires, especially today, because our payroll is more complicated than ever. Our benefits are more complicated than ever. Human resources issues are more complicated than ever. Many fire districts and fire departments, fire districts specifically, and that's my background, we grew up doing everything in-house. We grew up, doing most of that work ourselves. Over the course of my career, it has evolved significantly that to the point now that we all bring in HR professionals and have stood up that portion of the organization so that we can do it correctly. Rather than having a deputy chief in charge of personnel management or personnel services, we now have HR professionals who, this is what they do professionally. And it has been an absolute game changer. In the organizations that I have worked for, it has been an absolute game changer, and I've seen it done both ways. So I think that, your question is, do we see this in other places? We do. And in organizations as sophisticated as yours, We don't. And that's what this report should really do for you. It should help you support the decisions you need to really support HR and build that function up to what it really needs to be to support your organization.
Right, so I agree with that. So getting back to the communications piece though,
Mhm.
because of the new complications, right, with the Harley labor laws, et cetera, the communication has to be much clearer, it seems. And so, I don't know, I mean, just so you know, Chief, I've always had this issue with what I have seen, the lack of clear communication with HR, and that results in conflicts between staff and the HR department. So I just want to put that out there, that communication piece, it sounds like it's important enough for you to actually have this as a recommendation in this report. So Robert, you wanted number 16. Oh. Okay, sorry, Ken, I'm glad y'all highlighted the communications aspect.
No. It's quite all right. And it's, you know what, I tell you what's probably the most wonderful thing for me is doing this kind of work. It's just great to know that you actually read the report. That is fantastic.
Okay. Robert, you should bring up your number 16, recommendation 16, because that's where we are there.
On recommendation 16, it talks about consider reviewing and updating district policy. I don't know if that's 3.11 or 311. And it indicates news and media relations as needed.
Mhm.
And so you described it as some of the interviewees suggested that district could benefit from more frequent engagement with the news media, and he had via relying on social media. And you also include having the fire chief take a more active role with those outlets and ensuring that relevant district information is distributed to all news and media organizations. So are you making reference that there was a lack of that interaction we had with the news media? Are you talking about, having the district to set the scenario for, rather than have the media develop so I guess if I'm using an appropriate word, the narrative for whatever situation that is going on that we're reporting on?
Sure. I'm going to ask Dr. Lynch to chime back in here again, since she was on since she was on site for stakeholder interviews. I think she may be able to provide a little bit of context to some of that, but I will tell you, as she comes on, that this has been a big discussion in a lot of the fire service, and there's a lot of organizations very close to you that are very active on the media front, the social media front, have a very significant presence and are very, very active. A lot of the local law enforcement agencies specifically are very active in reaching out to the community and providing information on an ongoing basis. And it's a challenge for sure, but it is something that a lot of us are paying much closer attention to. And I suspect that part of what you're hearing is a reflection of what others view as sort of the norm out there in public safety industries, fire and law enforcement specifically. Dr. Lynch, do you have anything that you can add on that relative to what the stakeholders might have shared?
Yes, Ken, thank you. Yes, you're correct. There are two aspects to this. One is that policy, as I recall, because we did these interviews in July. Okay, so I am, relying on long-term memory and hoping it's still there. So at that time, we looked at the policy, and as I recall, there was an emphasis on social media and not on other media. The other piece to that is that several people had mentioned that they did not believe that the non-social media, that everybody did not have the same access to information about the district as the others. So it's not clear to me if the feeling was that there's favoritism. It was just that there are media, again, non-social media that are being left out. And so that, you know, that was basically the gist of that. And I think the other, in terms of context, I think the other thing going on there is that it appeared to me that there was a bit of kind of compare and contrast going on. Apparently the previous fire chief spent a lot of time on public relations personally. And, you know, of course, your chief now is new. He was new then. He'd only been there a few months when we conducted these interviews. And, you know, that was not something he had paid attention to up to that point, to the extent that people were used to it. So I think that, you know, he's been there over a year now, and there's a better sense of that. But that's where that came from.
All right, thank you.
Can we move on? Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, Ken. You want to
Sure.
continue?
Sure. And then the last item on this slide is to replace the word citizen with a more inclusive term in all district communications and documents. The word citizen is a little bit limiting, something a little bit more, a little more friendly, community members, something of that nature, to be a little less, a little more inclusive, I should say.
So quick question regarding that. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
do you hear that kind of feedback from different stations?
Dr. Lynch, we heard that in stakeholder interviews, correct?
State from personnel from different stations, because our constituents it's a very, very broad group and diverse group,
Mhm.
right? And so I can see where some communities who have more sensitivities to that. I mean, like, I actually use the word residents for everyone. I that's just me, and community or community member, something like that.
Mhm.
But did you get that feedback from different stations within the district? Like people who work at different stations?
No, ma'am, we did not talk to people by stations. In meeting with the sworn members, we had there were people coming and going. I'm thinking we had about a dozen people in all from different stations, and as they got calls, they would leave and then they would come back. So I cannot say that, you know, there was any one station more than others. I will say that, you know, the word citizen is used across the fire service, and it's been done for a long time. The issue is that it is, you know, it implicitly and really directly, if you're talking about citizens, and what about the non-citizens? The concern is that in today's society, very litigious, all it takes is one attorney to say you are discriminating illegally against non-citizens.
Yeah.
So, you know, even though it's been fine to use citizens in the past, the fact is demographics are changing, people's sensibilities are changing, and really for purposes of inclusion, because I know that diversity, equity, and inclusion are important to the district. So to be more inclusive and to forestall any, you know, possibility of people's feeling left out or feeling that, you know what, you're discriminating against me and I'm going to sue you. So that's what's behind that recommendation.
Thank you.
Just related to that, what is the favorable term of the day? Because it seems to shift over time. Is it community member? Is that the favorable reference now?
You know, I've seen it used, some use community members, some say residents, some say residents and visitors. Just something that is indicative of everybody who is there. So if you're visiting, you know, we will take care of you. You are not excluded. So very general terms, you know, the more inclusive, the better. But those are the ones generally residents and visitors, or community.
Yeah, because residents doesn't really cover, we have a lot of businesses. And so there's transient workers and people transiting through the area. They're not residents, they are community members. And so.
I think you'd be safe in saying community members.
I'm not trying to solve it here, I was just curious if you had.
Yes,
And that is always the term that I like to use as well. It is the community that gives us the opportunity to serve them, through the fire district. It is really the community. We're part of the community, so it's a much more inclusive term, and it's always been my go-to.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sorry, if you want to continue, that'd be great, Ken.
Okay. And here's that word: evaluate communications between the district and community served, especially with elected officials, and that's a key one.
What did you hear? What kind of feedback did you get for that? I think we are a little deficient in there. And was it across the board with personnel and board members?
I think the context there was the fact that Atherton was not happy and had been talking about leaving the district. And the concern was that although it seemed to be taken care of at the time, there is some concern that it can come up again, and that the district needs to have maybe closer relationships with the elected officials, so that if that issue begins to arise, you can catch it early on, as opposed to maybe waiting till it's gotten bigger than it needs to be.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right. Under findings regarding communications, concerns were expressed regarding communication challenges related to the existing radios. We already discussed that, so we don't need to cover that. Stakeholders reported communications have improved during the past year and are very optimistic that this is going to continue. Stakeholders anticipate current communication challenges will be resolved by identifying and conveying district strategic goals and restructuring of the organization. All right, these are project findings related to information technology. Unfortunately, Clay Stewart couldn't be with us. He is our information technology and accreditation SME. He did an outstanding job on this section of the report, and I will run through it for you, but there may be specific questions that I may struggle with. So just in case you have any questions, just be mindful of that. Governance policies and control documentation appears to be ineffective for IT services management. We need to formalize the process to improve the policies that outline your information technology services. And I can tell you, in my own experience, this is not unusual. IT services for a fire district, especially within your own house, it's a very important part of your infrastructure. And it is really easy to overwhelm them with all the technological things that we ask them to do.
So Chuck, I think had a question, right?
Yeah, could you go back just to the finding a second?
Yes, yes.
Just tell me what that means. I don't understand how you're using governance policy is ineffective, meaning I don't know, I have no idea what that means.
The policies and procedures really, as they relate to information technology, information services, and how they serve the district, the customers, both the internal and external customers, they're not well documented. And we'll get into it a little bit further, but they're just not well documented, not like many of the other parts of the organization.
But it doesn't just say they're not documented, it says they're ineffective. What does that mean?
Correct. They simply don't match up with the demands for your information technology division.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. IT does not appear to be strategically managed for organizational improvement initiatives. Incorporate strategic planning methodologies for IT, especially for equipment and software upgrade replacements. It is really easy for your information technology, for your IT folks to be putting out spot fires all day long with all the IT that they have to support. As new programs come in place, new systems come in place, hardware times out. replacement cycles, all of those things. It is really easy to get sidetracked with putting out spot fires and fixing things throughout the day and be detracted from putting things in place and putting processes in place so that you have timely updates for software, virus software, those kinds of things, and putting new equipment in service, all of those things. It's really easy for that to get sidetracked with if you're not thinking strategically. Service request process is not well defined, negatively affecting workflow and IT staff productivity. The IT service catalog and architecture does not appear to be formally documented. Documents that do exist do not appear to be systematically managed. Identify the fire district's value chain. Essentially, this is how your IT division does business. Understanding the various points of your IT division, how they provide service, where they're being effective, where they're being ineffective, understanding those critical linkages and relationships that they have with the other divisions, optimizing for efficiency to maximize efficiency and maximize effectiveness, and really to improve the service delivery, the service that they deliver to the district overall. It's really difficult. I can tell you, we went through this at the organization that I came from. So Santa Clara County went through this. We had an information services manager that grew with the organization, but as our technological needs grew, our needs outpaced our IT manager. We truly needed an IT division that fully understood how to support the information technology needs of a modern organization. And we're talking everything from response apparatus to payroll systems, to information management systems, to SQL servers and all of the other stuff that goes with it. It was a much more complicated environment than we fully appreciated. It was only through deep analysis that we recognized that we were understaffed and under-equipped to really deal with the true needs that we had. We had lots of energy and lots of desire to take advantage of technology to get us out the door quicker, to the scene faster, and get us better information when we were on scene. The problem that we had was we didn't have the strategic vision to put those things in place and the plan to actually put those building blocks in place so that we could actually get there. That's an incredibly important part of your information technology division, and deeply built within the value chain is understanding all of those components and how they come together to provide that service most effectively to the district.
Hey, Ken, there's a curiosity question on your experience at Santa Clara.
Mm-hmm.
What was the increase percentage-wise in the budget necessary to achieve that goal?
So we went, okay, so when I became fire chief, we had an information services manager, a single person who was trying to support the IT function for the organization. I believe we had a management analyst that was also working with that individual. We ended up doing, well, we did a comprehensive information technology assessment. We had somebody come in, do a top-down IT assessment and build an IT strategic plan. We ended up staffing the unit with a director of information technology and two IT techs and a management analyst, and really. And they didn't do GIS, they didn't do any of that stuff. They were really there just to support the infrastructure. I mean, we were going from, desktop systems to laptops and iPhones and tablet command and all kinds of stuff, and trying to support all the hardware and the architecture was simply too much for the organization to do with the two people that we had. And so we really had to think. We really had to think outside the box. I mean, we had done like a lot of fire districts did. we grew up, thinking, oh, we understand how to do this. We can do it ourselves. And we realized we simply can't do this ourselves. We need to bring the professional capability in-house. It was a game changer. It was an absolute game changer for us.
I'm just curious, and this is kind of my ignorance, when you're talking about information technology, would you expect that group to be dealing with some of these other recommendations like ADP system and telestaff system and so forth?
So that's funny because, yeah, so here's the thing. Yes, but your users of ADP, your users of telestaff are going to be your HR folks, your finance folks, your battalion chiefs are dealing with staffing every day. Those are your users. Those are your customers that need that equipment and that software to work. IT is the one making sure that you have the latest technology, if that is what you so choose, that technology is being backed up, that it's fully protected from viruses and cyber attacks and those kinds of things. Your IT is really watching your back end and thinking, really thinking outside the box about how you're vulnerable, how to back yourself up, how to protect yourself. I mean, for us as public safety professionals, I know how to use technology enough, but it's the architecture and the support of that technology and making sure that it functions correctly and effectively, and I'm safe using that technology. That's what they do for you. So your ADPs and I mean, if you have telestaff, you probably know that there was a significant issue with telestaff just a couple of years ago when they were ransomwared. Those kinds of things are really important, and your IT division is who protects you from that kind of stuff, protecting your ADP, protecting your personnel records and your HIPAA records and all of that stuff.
And I didn't see anything in here about space. If their actual workspace is adequate, because every time I've been in there, it's kind of like they're on top of one another.
Yeah.
And I don't see that they can actually work effectively with, being in that small room. And as to different, like your storage racks, and your SAN network, I mean, are all those things adequate, Ken, that your group went through?
Yes, we went through that exact same thing. I mean, like anybody in the Bay Area trying to find property for a fire district building is good luck. If you find it and you want to buy it, that's great, but good luck getting it. We ended up carving up the building into smaller and smaller and smaller units until we couldn't do it anymore. And we finally had to move out of that building. But that's exactly what we did. We had an IT staff of 1.5 that grew to a staff of 4.5. And they went from occupying half of a server room to a complete reconstruction of the second floor to have a modern workspace for these people. It was, unfortunate, but for a period of time, like you just described, we had people working in very tiny workspaces that were not really effective or correct.
So can I piggyback off of that a little bit, because I think Rob brings up a good point. But in terms of workspace and the resources and the possible resource gaps, but which I think that we have to kind of maybe invest in. But I'm also concerned with the reporting structure on the organization chart, because it looks like, and I can't find it in, I read it, but I can't find it in the report right now, that part of IT will go to administrative services, I think, and also that the deputy chief at the end is also, is the deputy chief at the top of the umbrella in that chain is under or. Well, so my point is that you've got people who are senior to this highly specialized staff that to me is also like kind of the unsung heroes, because they're actually protecting the district in different ways, right? And I am concerned that if the resource gaps show that these IT professionals can't work effectively, that they're going to get deemed. And their evaluations may not be great because the reporting structure doesn't allow them to necessarily succeed, if that makes any sense.
It does, and I can only speak to. I know the fire chief has got a lot of things that he's considering from a reorganization perspective, and I know Chief Lorenzen he's far brighter than I am. I'm sure he's given a lot of thought to this. I had my own way of dealing with it when information technology was becoming an area that we had to sort of cleave off as its own division. Where it belonged was a big decision for me. It was in our business services unit, which for my organization made sense. Those individuals were co-located, not physically, but from an organizational perspective, they were co-located with the rest of the administrative business unit, which was payroll and personnel and all of that. And it was simply to provide oversight to the division. There's a number of ways you can do it for sure. One of the challenges I think that I faced as fire chief was just making sure that they had the tools that they needed to do the job and trusting the director to make the right decision and give me good counsel so that I could give them the support that they needed to do what they needed for the district. And that's really what it's all about. And I know that Chief Lorenzen is absolutely on the same page. I understand that.
Yeah, I interrupted, I didn't mean to, sorry.
Well, I mean, and this will be part of the ongoing conversations. First of all, as far as physical space, we're already working on expanding into the yellow house to give IT some additional space there, because that's accurate. Yeah, just organizational structure wise, obviously it's a snapshot, and at the time we didn't have the administrative services director. As Ken was alluding to, they had IT under the business services, which is very similar to our administrative services director that houses IT, finance, and HR. And I mean, it's accurate that snapshot in time, our IT folks are great. They didn't have a whole lot of direction and leadership. Now they do, and also empowering them and giving them a lot of things that they need, including space, helping them prioritize. As Ken had said, they put out fires all day long without any strategic direction. So now we're giving them strategic direction and the budget and some additional training and really kind of doing a lot of those things. But snapshot in time, those didn't exist back in July.
Right, but the strategic, who's giving them strategic direction? Are they
That's from
trying
us.
to?
I mean,
I know, but I mean, you don't have, I mean, with all due respect, no one has that knowledge and expertise in that area. So how would you know what kind of strategic direction you get?
strategic direction is priorities, right? They are the specialists, right? I am not an IT guy. The findings in this section made my head hurt because whoever was a subject matter expert. So, but providing some leadership, trying to figure out what's important, collaborating with the IT folks, all those lists of things. We're way behind on some of our software updates and not biting everything off at once. Picking a couple big things to do right now and then putting out the fires the rest of the time. I mean, I can do that. Francine can do that, but we're all doing it as a team. When we sat down and set up our internal strategic goals and objectives, part of that were IT projects that were things that really need to be done. Yeah, part of it was health staff is on its way out. We've already updated it with CrewSense. That was a collaborative project with work groups, IT, line folks, labor, us, all of those things. But up until that point in time, IT was just trying to get by with putting out fires every day. So, I mean, all it takes really is somebody with the ability to put their head up and kind of look around and help them organize and figure out what they need, and then get out of their way, right? Because they know what they're talking about. So, I mean, that's kind of what's happening.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to devalue the report here by any measure, but that you could almost use this as a template for probably 90% of organizations this size, and you can probably reuse the same material and apply it to 20 or 30 different public agencies. Yeah, in other words, put differently, most of the time when you look at organizations and IT, organizations of this size, you're gonna get an IT report just like this. The thing that I thought was kind of notable was actually on page 48, which the data stops in 2019-20, but they had a budget of 580,000 and they only spent 302,000, which is very supportive in my mind of, you know, somebody wasn't prioritizing what was important to them because they didn't even spend the money that they had. Yeah, and generally IT organizations don't have difficulty spending money in today's world.
Right.
So that it's kind of unique. I don't know what happened after that period of time. But it's, yeah, the fact that they ran under budget is kind of an indication of lack of direction.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up, because I thought that this breakdown of time used on page 63, I mean, you know, in terms of efficiency, efficient use of time, I mean, I don't know if there's any connection with the budget, the budgeting.
Well,
I don't know how you map, I guess.
efficient use of the human resources in IT is highly dependent on the technical resources that are put in place.
Yeah,
Yeah, the quality of their server room, quality of the software they've implemented, how current it is. You know, it all plays into, it's almost like a hamster wheel in a way. And if you get behind on the level of software, the currency of your hardware, the currency of your processes, then all that happens is IT staff every morning jumps on the hamster wheel and spins around and they can't get anything done. And at some point you have to break that chain and then actually, you know, put the projects and the structure in place to do what the chief suggested, which is, you know, taking one particular system, well, get that one upgraded.
Yeah.
And they probably spend far less time managing that system than they did trying to bolt together and keep all the piece parts working of an old outdated system. But technologies move so fast, it's, if you have a 2 to 3 year window where you're not focused the way you need to be, you know, you can find yourself 6, 7 years behind after 2 to 3 years of, you know, kind of not paying attention. So I can spend a lot of time with the group on IT commentary, and a little experience in that world. You know, I think this, to the point of the report, I think the report was well done, and I think it identifies clearly what happens when you get behind on the general upgrade cycle of everything you're doing.
Yeah.
The district's just behind. It's not, but not unlike most organizations. They're gonna put fires out. I mean, that's, yeah,
they are.
there's no, it's very, very hard to stay up to date.
Up to date, without spending a lot of money, yeah. You guys, okay. Okay, thanks, Ken, keep going.
All right, I think we're pretty much at a logical place here with the recommendation to evaluate the IT staff and workload and the tasks that they're currently performing. The district has taken steps to identify technology, equipment, and life cycles. However, this has not been updated since FY 2007 or 08. Budget for supplies, materials, and contractual services appears to be adequate for fire district needs. Human resources. Lack of attention and accountability for the administrative side of the organization has resulted in numerous challenges for HR. HR has many opportunities for improvement that will increase the district's overall effectiveness in providing a high level of services to internal and external customers. Stakeholders gave human resources mixed reviews. This isn't unexpected given their enforcement role regarding organizational rules. We recommend working with legal counsel to ensure that the district is in full compliance with local, state, and federal employment laws. We recommend having the district's policy review committee conduct a thorough review of policies, looking for gaps, inconsistencies, ambiguous language, and ensuring accountability mechanisms are in place, and ultimately making a recommendation for the fire chief to consider. Workers' compensation is always a fun one to talk about. There was a significant amount of criticism levied about workers' compensation. We recommend engaging a workers' compensation expert to audit the program for adequacy and funding and potential improvements. We also recommend a review of job descriptions and update them as necessary.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, please.
It's my understanding that the district has a third-party administrator for workers' comp. Are you saying that that's not sufficient, or that we have the wrong person, or what are you saying in terms of your recommendation?
Really just to take a look at your workers' compensation system and how your workers' compensation claims are processed, not necessarily your third-party administrator. Oftentimes this one comes down to communications as well, lack of understanding of the workers' compensation system, lack of understanding of where you are in the system, communications back and forth with the organization versus coordinating with your third-party administrator. The workers' compensation system on the whole is very, very, very complicated. And few people, if any, understand it, and certainly not our employees. So much criticism during the stakeholder process came up about the workers' compensation system that it warrants at least a look to see where the issue actually is. It may be nothing more than a communications issue.
I see, I was interpreting it differently. You're saying that people, employees in particular, were unhappy with what was going on. You're not talking about us doing a poor job of administering workers' comp.
Not to my knowledge, no, sir.
I see, okay, I misunderstood, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, thanks.
Ensure HR staff is accountable. This goes back to your earlier statement, I believe. Ensure HR staff is accountable for the quality of services provided. Research the feasibility of replacing ADP and Telestaff systems with an integrated human resources information system or some other system. And make a recommendation to the fire chief for consideration. Review performance evaluation forms and create greater clarity and equitable standards for personnel across the organization. Given its functions and the nature of the work that it does, the HR department is likely understaffed. Personnel are being underutilized due to many manual and labor-intensive tasks, leaving other district needs unmet. The recommendation here is to add one other HR professional. This is a very common thing. Human resources is a very complex subject. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes into managing the HR division of an organization your size. And it is much like your IT section. This is very easy to be overwhelmed dealing with spot fires throughout the day. Administrative services and finance. The district's website provides little or no information for the public to evaluate the monthly financial activities of the district. Our recommendation is to develop a process for increasing the district's financial transparency. It does not appear the board of directors has an active role in the approval of district expenditures beyond the approval of the budget or major capital expenditures. Recommendation is that you revise the fiscal policy and procedure manual to require board participation in various district management processes and approval of internal control processes. The administrative services manager, finance manager, supervisor of the senior accountant is not required to have certification level equivalent to or superior to the senior accountant. The recommendation would be to consider revising the admin services and finance division manager job description. As I understand it, that has already taken place.
So can I ask a question? Why this particular function has been primarily concerned about the finances, and I mean, obviously it's a much broader responsibility, but as an elected board member, our number one job, in my opinion, is to make sure that our tax dollars or financial resources are being used in the most effective and efficient way. So to me, at least in the 12 years I've been on this board, that function and that interaction with the board is important. That function with the administrative services, you can change the title. I don't care what the title of the person is, but I am concerned that, that we have someone who's got, senior credentials for, we in here, you mentioned something about the administrative services director have be the most senior credentialed, unless I misinterpret, which is entirely possible. That person be the head of this group. And so changing the job description worries me a little bit. Not that Francine can't do a good job, but I know that the financials are so important, not just to the board, but to the public, especially as we continue to negotiate our contracts with our personnel. I mean, thankfully, this board has been really smart about understanding the finances better than I think most city councils and boards. But the public I know has commented to me numerous times on, how we pay or compensate our personnel. So I am worried about the financial management piece, because we've had good and bad over the years that I've been here.
So, Director, if I could offer some clarification and Ken can confirm it. The finding and recommendation here has nothing to do with the new administrative services director. It's the old administrative services manager that we reclassified into the finance manager. We hired Elaine in there. That's what they're talking about in the finding that,
I know.
okay.
But I mean, again, we have someone who is highly specialized, like Elaine, who is fantastic right away. And I just want to make sure that what he does, which I think is such an important job, is recognized as such, and that, the management, because Francine comes from an HR background, which is highly specialized too, but your financial background isn't as robust as Elaine's, for example. And that's not a criticism. I mean, we have seen great financial management and poor financial management. And so I don't want us to be in this situation again with the staffing challenges that might happen.
That's fine. And I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that the finding in the report has to do with Elaine supervising Long. It's not,
But it's
separately from that, yes, we have people that don't necessarily have expertise in every single area that they supervise, myself included.
Question, so is this the new position that is talked about in the report?
The position that they're talking about here is the finance manager position.
Okay.
The position that Director Crawley's, having some concern about is the creation of an administrative services director that oversees a number of disciplines. And just some stuff there, but we have.
With the understanding that the financials are important to the public.
Sure.
And to this board.
It's not in this role that Francine playing right now. That's what I thought. Am I missing something?
Francine is our new administrative services director that oversees the finance manager, the IT manager, the HR manager, and the clerk of the board.
By his organization structure.
That's
Yeah.
the structure. The finding here is referencing that relationship between the supervising accountant and the finance.
Right, but I don't think we should be working in silos. And that's what this sounds like. This conversation sounds like that. So that's just my concern, Gary.
Yes, my concern is a little different. It had to do with some of the wording in Ken's comments.
So,
So the way I look at this is your recommendations and your analysis here was predominantly around the organizational structure, and you touched on some transparency issues. But there were some comments made about the way the district spends money and such. And at least unless I'm reading the reporting correctly, the report is not analyzing, you're not analyzing or drawing conclusions about how the district actually spends its money and deploys capital within the organization. Is that correct? Because I want to make sure that nothing being said here, this is all organizational transparency related. I just want to make sure that you're not identifying some particular concern about the actual way money is is used within the district.
You are correct. We are not.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on your recommendation or your observation that the board was not, I don't remember the right wording, but overseeing or supervising expenditures. And I'm curious to know, are you talking about some sort of oversight before the expenditure is made or after the expenditure is made?
Well, the board delegates a certain amount of spending authority to the fire chief, and you have a policy that clearly dictates what that spending authority is, correct?
Yes.
Okay, the statement is about the transparency of that and providing that information to the board on a more regular basis and actively involving you in that conversation on a more regular basis. There are other findings and recommendations as we go through this section that you'll see probably provides a little more background on that to make it a little more clearer for you. We also have Randy Parr, who is our finance SME, who's also a certified public accountant on the call, who can more directly answer questions if you have any additional ones.
Yes, there came a time, it was during the pandemic, maybe 2 years ago, when something was discovered that the board was not reviewing our check register or something, which we were supposed to do quarterly, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But in reviewing the check register, again, that's looking at data that, the cow's out of the barn already. If there's something that shouldn't have happened, it's too late, it's done. And I guess what I'm curious about is what would you recommend as appropriate oversight? What kind of things would the board do to provide the oversight that you're recommending?
Without appearing to be
Go ahead.
without appearing to be micromanaging, which you said is a problem in the other part of this report.
Yeah, absolutely. But that comes down to board policy and providing spending authority to the fire chief. So that the fire chief has a level of spending authority up to a certain limit, depending on your comfort level. And obviously beyond that, he would need to come to you with a recommendation for your spending approval to expend funds. You're right. There is obviously to do business with the district, for the district to do business efficiently. The fire chief can't come to you with the check register every time he wants to spend money. So that is absolutely consideration. The discussion here is about transparency and providing that information to you, the board, to have oversight of the spending that is taking place with that is taking place with your authority that you give to the fire chief, and providing that information to the public. Randy, do you have anything you want to add on that?
So dense here, but I don't really know what transparency means. What would we look at and be able to say, now we're being transparent? Or what could the public look at? I'm just not sure what we should show them.
Trying to see if Randy is on still, if we still have him.
Is he shown as Randall?
Yes.
I think he's on that one. Yeah, Randall.
Yeah, she's unmuting him right now.
Okay, thank you.
You should be able to talk now.
Randy, can you hear us?
Let me try it now. Can you
There
hear
we
me?
go. We got you.
There we go. What we're recommending is that, on a monthly basis, you take your check register and you post it to your website. You might feel it would be beneficial to the public also to post your balance sheet, or at least your cash balances, as well as your budget to actual financial report, so they can see what you're doing on a monthly basis. I know in my city, we post our transaction reports on a monthly basis to our website. It serves us well. It does on occasion create a couple of questions from the public on why did you spend $874,000 with this company? Well, it's because we had to do significant maintenance on one of our water wells. But at least we know that somebody is looking at it and we can explain why we're spending the money that we're having to spend. I am kind of an anomaly. I was a fire chief for 25 years, but I'm also a CPA. So I drove our finance director nuts. I drove our city manager nuts. And then I got elected to city council on top of it after I retired.
Thank you. The example helps. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up on that example though? Did you, before you started just posting a check registry and budgetary information, did you take a look at that information from a, kind of a granularity level or presentation perspective to say, is it being presented in such a way that the public could actually understand it?
Well, it's basically a list of checks, the check number, who the check was written to, and the dollar amount.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the other part of it, when you said we're posting the budgetary information, cash balances and such. I'm a relatively new board member on the finance committee with a financial background, and I'm having to learn how to interpret our financials. And I'm just wondering if you adjust the way you show those or report those on the website, so that, kind of a citizen without the internal education could actually understand it.
No, sir. What we do is, obviously it's fund accounting, which is significantly different than for-profit accounting. Anything that comes in the door is treated as revenue, as in some manner. Anything that goes out the door is treated as an expenditure. So when you get loan proceeds in, it looks, oh, wow, that's a chunk of revenue. Well, yeah, it's loan proceeds. But, for the purposes of governmental accounting, it comes in as a revenue source. When you pay it back or when you buy a fire truck, that's an expenditure. It goes out the door, out off the bottom. We segregate our stuff so you have recurring revenues, recurring expenses, and then other income and other expense.
Okay,
Obviously, we do it in a summarized fashion. We don't want to put out there, 250 pages of the internal report that we get on a monthly basis.
We're not aligning on my question, your answer, but I'll take this back to the chief and have it circle back as part of his action, in response to this, because this won't be the productive place to dialogue on that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for making a stab at it.
Just for the board's information, I checked in with Ken. We're about halfway through his presentation. That's not to encourage us to go faster or slower. That's just to control
I
expectations.
know,
So
sorry.
I'll get.
I know.
No apologies needed. That was just give everyone a little situational awareness, which is fine.
Well, yeah, perfect.
You should have given that an hour ago.
Chuck? Okay, Ken, if you want to continue.
All right, I'm good to go. All right, next finding, the district does not have software or a methodology for managing physical resources. The recommendation is to implement tracking software and a system to manage tracking your capital assets. Coordination of improvement goals and strategic objectives between divisions is lacking. Recommendation is to ensure divisions collaborate in developing goals and objectives to accomplish the district goals. This speaks to the issue of siloing and giving the individual divisions the encouragement and freedom to move between themselves. Triton did not observe the existence of a long-term financial plan for both operational and capital expenditures. The recommendation is to develop a long-term financial plan to assist in meeting the district's goals and objectives. The district's fee schedule is effective July 1, 2017, so it's fairly dated. The recommendation is simply to conduct a fee study to update your fee schedule as appropriate. Next finding, the fiscal policy and procedure manual contains revenue policy that is unachievable under California legislation. The recommendation is to review and amend the fiscal policy and procedure manual, specifically the fiscal management and revenue section. Next finding, the district's check voucher register is provided to the board on a quarterly basis as an attachment to the monthly treasurer's report, much like we just covered a moment ago. The recommendation is to include the check voucher register each month with the treasurer's report to the board. Next finding, documentation related to a formal employee onboarding process could not be located. The recommendation is to develop a formal employee onboarding process documented. All right, moving on to facilities, which is inclusive of fleet. The district has identified deficiencies with its existing facilities and is taking steps to address current and future needs. Policies and standard operating guidelines reflecting industry best practices are in place, appear adequate, and are reviewed annually. The budget for materials, contractual services, and fixed assets appear adequate for current district needs. Facilities oversight lacks sufficient depth for managing outside contractors, vendors, and overall operational elements of the district's facilities. Consider creating a designated position for facilities management. The fleet division does not have any standard operating procedures. Develop and incorporate fleet management policies and procedures. The fleet division lacks an adequate number of trained and certified maintenance personnel. Fleet maintenance facility is inadequately sized for current and future needs. We recommend evaluating the current staffing allocation and the maintenance facility capacity. Your fleet management software does not provide the data necessary to implement a proactive approach to maintenance and inventory services. The Urban Search and Rescue Fleet Deployment Program needs to be evaluated and restructured to meet current and future fleet demand. We recommend researching and potentially purchasing a new fleet management software system such as MaxTrax or something of that nature. It is an absolute game changer for your fleet management system. All right, this takes us to findings and recommendations for training, both operations and civilian. The district has a progressive training program meeting NFPA, State Fire Training, Cal OSHA, and DMV standards. The district is recognized as an industry leader in providing specialized technical rescue training and response. As I said, well-known. Menlo Park Fire Protection District trains employees and personnel from departments across the state and well beyond. Policies and standard operating guidelines are in accordance with industry best standards and updated annually as needed. The district has numerous certified qualified subject matter experts in-house for course delivery and specialized instruction. The division budget appears to be adequate for current district needs. Staffing levels for the division appear to be adequate with an assigned delegation of tasks and appropriate span of control. Strategic goals have been identified for the division, but not publicly approved by the board nor integrated into daily activities. Again, speaking to the lack of a strategic plan.
Yeah.
Could you expand upon this? I'm ignorant about this. What do we do? What kind of training do we do beyond our boundaries?
Beyond your boundaries?
Yeah.
Well, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Menlo Park Fire and Menlo Park provides training to host classes for folks from all over the Bay Area for technical rescue, urban search and rescue, swift water, all of that, correct?
That's accurate. I mean, we provide training for outside agencies. We also attend training outside of our jurisdiction for whatever it might be, swiftwater rescue or heavy rescue training, task force training, ICS classes, et cetera.
Do we get paid for
Do we get paid for going to those trainings?
that? No, for conducting those trainings.
I think in general, no. I mean, there's mutual benefit, you know, where everyone is doing those kinds of things, but we generally are not getting reimbursed as others come to our trainings. But we're conducting the training all, in any case for our members, we will also invite people and just like, you know, happens with us being invited to other agencies for training.
I think that, and that's what he's talking about here.
I didn't see the specific point there, but you know, on the slides, I missed that slide, but
Could you go back a couple slides? Just
Yeah,
take a look at-
absolutely. The district has numerous certified qualified subject matter experts in-house for course delivery and specialized instruction.
What about one before that?
Menlo Park Fire trains employees and personnel from departments across the state and beyond.
Okay, and so those are mutual training things is what you're saying?
Yeah,
I thought we were training sessions for other agencies.
no, I mean, they're generally for, I mean, if it's task force training, it's a combination of our instructors and other agencies' instructors that are subject matter experts. Anyone who's part of a task force from Oakland or anywhere can come in. So yeah, it's just one of those things, and you find that generally across the fire service where training will be offered up to adjacent or other agencies free of charge because they're already doing it, and there's no incremental cost for it. Sometimes an agency will cover certain de minimis things. You know, if there's a registration fee or a workbook or something like that, but generally it's just done, yeah, neighbor helping neighbor.
Okay, well, it says across the state and beyond, so I thought maybe we were sending people out of state to do training for others.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
I think some of that chief may be referencing the task force training that is actually come from, it's funded from the grant to provide task force training that includes task forces from a.
I know we have people, and we do have
Yeah,
people from other countries coming in.
yeah, but that's related to the task force training programs. Not necessarily the core district training programs.
the
Go ahead.
recommendation is to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, go ahead and proceed, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Chief. The recommendation is to conduct an updated strategic planning process and consider developing a mentor coaching program. The district has no formal succession management process or plan. Elements of an effective succession management process are currently in existence, but they're just pieces rather than integrated into a whole plan. There is no structured process for the training and development of administrative personnel. Recommendation is to develop a process or structure that addresses the training and development of civilian staff as well. Policies in Chapter 6, training, focus on suppression staff to the exclusion of administrative personnel, or the ambiguity of language raises questions regarding the applicability to civilian staff. The recommendation there is to review training policies and update as needed to ensure clarity of language and inclusion of civilian personnel.
So can I ask a question about that? So
Certainly.
who did you get, which group gave you that feedback? Is it the civilian personnel or was it the suppression person or both? I mean, because I agree with that recommendation and that finding.
I'm going to see if Dr. Lynch, if this came through any of the stakeholder interviews.
No, it did not. Stakeholder interviews were part of what we did. The other part was a review of your policies and procedures. And so it was during that document review that that we noticed that it, so for example, in some part of a policy, it's clear that it covers both sworn and civilian staff. And in another part, it's not clear, or it refers only to sworn members. And so the question is, so what about civilians? So it did not come up in stakeholder interviews. It came up during the document review portion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch. Triton was unable to determine whether the training division engages in designated training activities and carries out the responsibilities as they apply to all district employees as specified in the policies and procedure manual. The recommendation is to review training related policies to ensure the division complies with its assigned tasks and responsibilities, making updates as needed. HR and training staff should review and validate the effectiveness of online trainings as it relates to achieving the stated learning objectives. Fire prevention. The Bureau's mission supports the overall district mission and outlines the duties of inspection and fire investigation. The district is an industry leader in several areas, including certain fire prevention policies. The fire marshal serves as an example for leading staff in living out the district philosophy. He is innovative and plans to shift the Bureau toward community risk reduction. No reason to argue with a good thing. We suggest refocusing efforts toward the new national model for risk reduction, Vision 2020. The reach and impact of public education programs is limited. Outreach appears to be driven by past attendance and customer request, rather than targeted messages for the preservation of life and property. The purpose of investigations and code enforcement are identified in goal objectives, but implementation appears to be targeted towards quantity rather than quality. The recommendation is to create risk reduction goals that measure the effectiveness of efforts and reduce deaths, injuries, and property loss.
Can I ask a question about that? I'm
Yes.
curious, I'm curious about how broad that is in general. Are they looking at just things that a fire department would deal with? Or does this relate even to things that would involve law enforcement or health or other kinds of agencies?
When we talk about it, and that is a really good question, because when we talk about community risk reduction, it is really easy for people to gravitate towards traditional fire prevention and the traditional mission of the fire service or fire prevention division. Risk reduction, community risk reduction, is a much more holistic approach, utilizing data to look at the entire range of available data and inputs to help us make decisions about how to make our community safer. So oftentimes, we are working with other partners beyond the fire department, or law enforcement agencies, psychological health agencies, behavioral health agencies, and a lot of other non-traditional partners to make our community safer. Risk reduction is exactly that. It's about risk reduction, not just fire safety. So it is a much more comprehensive, holistic look, and utilizing data from a wide variety of sources to find opportunities to make our community safer.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Position descriptions support succession planning, yet evaluation forms do not include the results achieved. The recommendation is add outcome measurements to the staff evaluations. The district follows state requirements for fire code adoption in partner agencies served. The Bureau publishes a standards and guidelines manual updated each code adoption cycle that serves developers, builders, and contractors. And I can tell you from experience that is appreciated. The recommendation is to ensure that the next adoption cycle of the fire prevention code includes the upgrade to Class A roof coverings. The Bureau issues permits in accordance with the fire code and local guidelines. The recommendation is to, where possible, automate communication on shared projects such as plan review, inspection, code enforcement, weed abatement, etc. Fees are adopted to recover costs of services, most recently updated in 2017. Again, the recommendation is to update the fee schedule. The district is well automated with iPads equipped with workflow processes for fire and life safety. However, the RMS system is outdated and cumbersome and is being replaced by ImageTrend. Obviously, the recommendation would be to do the full implementation of the new RMS and utilizing the RMS, create mission and goal dashboards to display progress in meeting qualitative and quantitative goals. The referral and intervention policy for the Juvenile Fire Center program has been sidelined following the passage of state law regarding the interviewing of minors. Our recommendation is at your earliest convenience to reinvigorate that program and get it restarted.
Good question. This is the first I've heard of that last recommendation number 9. Maybe you can kind of help me out. I mean, is there a problem you have here locally to have a program like it, or why did the program lack of funding, lack of interest? I know you might have been well before your time here, Chief, but what is that program and how?
Well, and I can comment, like, we had a juvenile fire center program where I came from last time, and it's been a long-standing program. It was been around since I was a brand new firefighter. It was usually when you have the kids playing with matches, the young men and women that get caught, rather than sending them to juvenile hall, they put them in contact with either a mentor at the fire station or one of our investigators, and talk to them about consequences and things like that. It's kind of a coaching program to keep people out of juvenile hall and the system like that. So, as far as the state law and the challenges related to that, I'm not familiar with those, but we apparently had a similar program here in Menlo Park. And it just has,
12 years I've been on here, this is the first time I've heard of it.
of the juvenile fire center program. So I don't know how active our program was here, but it ebbs and flows too. But, so. And they're just, it's not that we have a specific problem, it's just generally kids love playing with fire. So.
They make a recommendation is to reinstate it. So
Right.
the question really becomes for me is in terms of, I guess the source of where people come from would probably be from the juvenile detention center or from high school, not necessarily high school, but maybe junior high school.
We usually get a referral from law enforcement, our law enforcement partners who say, hey, we've got an issue. Do you have somebody who's part of that program, and they can refer them?
Right.
So,
How, I guess the next question, I'll let you go at that point. How can we kind of assess whether if a program like that is not necessary, but where can we get the information, kind of understand whether it's a high probability of reinstituting the program that there will be enough clientele, right, for lack of better words, to make it really successful, right?
and then we'll have the desired outcome.
Yeah,
So-
that would be the success.
I know I don't remember how many recommendations there were there, and you're thinking a lot, so. The plan is moving forward is that we're gonna go through and try and prioritize these internally and then check back in with the board on those. And, on something like this, I still have a lot to learn on related to the efficacy of the program and its success, and whether that's one of the early things we want to tackle, or later, or not at all. Sorry, Ken, if we don't follow all of your recommendations, but
Oh, man.
So, I mean, those are all relevant questions. Like I said, I don't know enough about how robust it was here or the value, but I want to make sure if we spend time and effort, it's going to have value for our communities.
Yeah, I think if it cut it becomes part of the team, a part of the goal, they're kind of understand it before taking it off on it at all.
Well, I'll take you back to one of the early findings was that we have so many programs, you know, and that we can't pay attention to them all. So we can't say everything's important, you know, we should pick the things that are most.
And we do it in the strategic planning process.
Yeah, and I have a bunch of questions once we get to that priority, kind of looking at checking, and because I know I saw that. And this is mainly for the board, because we got 30 recommendations, priorities there, and trying to sift it through where the board falling in play on some of those, or where we have to leave it up to the team.
Can I mention something? Yeah. We utilize this in our schools at a younger age for kids that are pulling the fire alarms, for example. And
False alarm.
But the false alarms. But the schools, we've lost Carol Parker, and there was talk about perhaps not replacing her. She's the person who would make school presentations. But the schools are a great place to get kids involved, but two, get them taking stuff home about car seats, about helmets, bike helmets, about fire alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, all sorts of stuff. And it can be a very, very powerful program. And I'll tell you, I've seen where, you get some little 4-year-old who's pulled the fire alarm, and the fireman man comes and sits down with him, he's got his full uniform on and so forth. And the kids are just riveted to what's going on. And you just have a feeling that this kid is never in his life going to do this again. But more than that he's going to be on the same team. And I think it's a very powerful point at which to reach people.
Right. Yeah, and those, just to give you assurances, those programs, even though Carol has retired, those programs are an important part of our plans, so.
Okay.
You can.
Okay, next finding. Operations staff are adequately involved in fire and life safety efforts. Controls are in place to monitor and ensure quality and quantity in accordance with policies, protocols, and processes. Completion rates for inspections are exceptionally high. Training is provided to operations staff on a quarterly basis. New recruits receive basic fire prevention training immediately completing the academy. Policy for annual reporting on program activities appears to be followed. However, quarterly reports are not created, and outcome measures to determine impacts of efforts on the fire problem or injury prevention are not used. Post-incident critiques include an evaluation of the effectiveness of fire code inspections and public education. The engine company inspection manual is outdated. It conflicts with the policy and procedures manual and should likely be eliminated. Since the district strategic plan was not formally adopted, the Bureau has not implemented nor reported on any of the strategic goals. Office of Emergency Management. Although approved staffing levels are adequate for the responsibilities of the district, 2 of the 3 positions were unfilled, putting the quality of the program at risk. The vision and goals of the Office of Emergency Management are not widely known or understood outside the district, including with the community and some board members. The recommendation is to develop a district strategy for the Office of Emergency Management or the new Community and Resilience Engagement Unit. The volunteer forum is not an effective communication channel with local volunteer organization leaders. Volunteers struggle to find value in attendance. The relationship between OEM and the disaster preparedness groups is strained. Frustrations are evident from both OEM and volunteers who feel undervalued and pushed away. The recommendation is that the district complete listening tours with local volunteer disaster preparedness groups and partner agencies, and create and fill a community volunteer coordinator position. There needs to be a process or mechanism to transfer funds or purchase equipment for volunteer groups if not currently defined. Consequently, there is dissatisfaction from local groups who feel their needs are not being met. Recommendation is to determine if funding disaster preparedness groups external to Menlo Park Fire Protection District is a priority, and if so, develop the appropriate policies and procedures for the same. The disaster service worker volunteer program is not well understood. That's not unique to Menlo Park. CERT trained volunteers have not been given the oath or registered with the Disaster Council. Therefore, they are unable to be officially deployed. The recommendation is that the district meet with Cal OES and San Mateo County Department of Emergency Management and ascertain disaster service worker volunteer program requirements so that they're better understood. Historical CERT records are non-existent. CERT operating procedures manual was found to be in draft format. While CERT courses are offered, there are a few follow-up activities that keep volunteers engaged once basic CERT training has been achieved. The recommendation is a full refresh of the CERT and disaster readiness program. The Office of Emergency Management has good working relationships with San Mateo County Department of Emergency Management and the local police departments within Menlo Park service area. There are 11 emergency annexes maintained within the Office of Emergency Management. The annexes were current, and there was evidence of an active review and revision strategy, and several were updated in 2021 and 2022.
What are the annexes?
The emergency plan itself has several annexes to deal with different hazards, floods, hazmat, all different kinds of disasters. Essentially, Cecile Pinto is on the call. If you want to ask specific questions about Office of Emergency Management, Cecile,
A binder?
Yeah, I mean,
They're
it's
working
the
time
plans.
user.
Yeah, it's our emergency plans. It could be a manual, it could be electronic. But yeah, it's the plans that go on the shelf. And along with that plan is, you can call it a chapter, an appendix, an annex, but it's on all those individual issues.
yeah, the plan outline the plan itself just outlines the basics, but the annexes are specific to the different types of conditions that you might face, whether it's an earthquake, a flood, a wildfire, something of that nature. It gets into more specific detail about those types of events and specific things necessary to deal with in those circumstances. Operations. Weekly operation division meetings, weekly operations division meeting agendas do not provide for productivity and staff engagement. Recommend consider creating a formalized process for operations division meetings. Several database platforms are used that are no longer supported and cannot integrate with one another. The recommendation is to evaluate the number and effectiveness of the current platforms and programs. Policies and standard operating guidelines are in accordance with industry best standards. Span of control appears to be within industry standards. Several goals have been identified for the division. However, the current strategic plan is incomplete and was not formally adopted. Management. There was no consensus about what positions comprise senior management. As a result, it was impossible to address many of the issues listed in the scope of work. District personnel are optimistic the fire chief will lead the organization in a positive direction, and his organizational restructure will address many of the current concerns about how the district is managed. The lack of an adopted strategic plan and succession management plan lead personnel to report they do not know the direction of the organization. Frustration exists related to barriers to promotion and lack of clear direction resulting from the number of acting appointments. Staff also report observing many instances of misalignment between and among divisions. Recurring areas of concern cited by stakeholders included the ability to continue providing high quality service in the face of significant challenges in the significant changes in the community. The number and management of district programs that's come up several times. Labor management issues, the steward of district resources, and the organization's culture. Our recommendation is to develop and implement a process for evaluating new programs and assessing the effectiveness of those that are existing. Assess the effectiveness of the district workers' compensation process. Determine the status of the district safety committee and take actions necessary to ensure its ongoing operation and maintenance. Review the management rights language, specifically in the MOU, and assess the extent to which they are being upheld and practiced.
Can you describe what triggered that last observation?
The management rights.
Yeah,
Yes.
recommendation.
This is the sort of the ebb and flow between what management rights are and what labor takes on in terms of their own responsibility and things that they do. And what happens is there tends to be this mission creep, and things that are truly within management rights end up becoming the practice of being performed by somebody else, and it erodes the integrity of management rights, which need to be monitored.
Andy, is there a full-time, or chief, I'm sorry, get a little,
Some
few hours
chief
old.
here.
Two
It's
chiefs,
okay. That's quite all right.
this chief,
Yeah.
our chief, yeah. Do we have a full-time safety officer?
No,
We don't.
we have a lot of life back into our safety committee. Chief Menard is the leader of it, and it's super well attended, super robust, and it is active. So safety officer wise, on incidents, it's always, the responsibility of one of the individuals to fill that role there, but we don't have a district identified safety officer.
So would it be
manager.
like to be battalion chief then?
It depends on, I mean, at each incident, somebody's assigned that responsibility. It's the IC unless he or she delegates it, but yeah.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Sure.
Recommendation, the fire chief and senior management lead a change initiative to address identified dysfunctions within the district's culture and develop a process for effective acquisition and use of property. Assess the effectiveness of current management meetings and consider suggestions for organization-wide or all-hands meetings. Develop and implement a succession management process and plan covering all district positions and functions. We're almost there. Accreditation. The accreditation team has completed a large amount of the required work. The accreditation manager function is currently an additional assignment, though, and assigned that responsibility. The incumbent employee who was the accreditation manager has since retired. So a new accreditation manager would have to be assigned, and the requisite training would have to be completed. Applicant status for the Menlo Park Fire Protection District ended before September 30th, 2022, requiring renewal if the process is to be continued. The analysis performed by the accreditation for accreditation will need to be enhanced and updated to meet current CFAI requirements. The standards of coverage must be updated to include all programs by risk severity. The strategic plan is nearing the end of its useful life and was not adopted by the board. The community and stakeholder input has not been completed or documented in the last 3 years. And most performance indicators have been completed, but will need to be updated to continue the process. Recommendation is to continue to seek CFAI accreditation status if you so choose. You'll need to update and or rewrite your community risk analysis and standards of cover and complete the strategic planning process.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Ken Chief, okay, there wasn't anything unless I missed it regarding ISO certification or rating.
No, there was not.
Why is that?
It was not part of our analysis. That would not have been part of the management audit to do an ISO, to look at ISO. That would have been a much more functional component of a community risk analysis or standards of cover were we doing that, but that would not have been part of a management audit.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of ongoing management audits, the report provides details on the scope, steps, and measures of effectiveness, accountability mechanisms, and the timing and frequency. As far as ongoing management options or, management audit options, there are 3. You can hire an outside expert, as you have done. You can create an internal audit function, should you so choose to stand one up on your own, or you could utilize a hybrid structure. Our recommendation would be to utilize a hybrid structure and consider adopting one where you utilize both internal staff trained and prepared to do some of the management audit functions with oversight from an independent third party to assist. And that is it. That is the last slide, believe it or not.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, questions?
I think I set it up.
What was that, Mike?
So that I set it up. Thank you.
Not any questions? Chief, or-
No, I mean, I obviously sent, first of all, thank you, Ken, and please thank Michelle and Ian.
Yeah.
So that was really helpful for us. I mean, that's a lot for us to digest, obviously. I had sent out an email earlier just suggesting some of the next steps, but obviously there's, like I said, there's a lot there, and I think a number of future meetings that could be having some time spent doing that. So like I had said in my recommendation to the board is I'd be happy to come back with a staff report at next meeting, kind of going through and putting these things in order and giving kind of just a report card on where we are. And I will give you our own internal feedback on things we'd like to pursue, and then look for some feedback from the board on what's important to you all. So.
Well, we're gonna be discussing our goals, hopefully.
Yes, that's-
So maybe this could be a good.
Yeah, a number of
time to-
the things that Ken identified in there are part of our goals discussion.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, Ken, thank you so much, and please thank your entire team. This was a really great report.
Well, thank you all very much. It was a pleasure and it was nice meeting all of you, and we appreciate the opportunity to see you and work with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay. So on to item 3, the consent calendar. Consent calendar. Does anyone want to remove one of the items or any item on the consent calendar? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to,
Before you make the motion, I ask for something to be removed.
Sure.
It'll make the minutes easier.
Okay. Yeah,
Go
go
for it.
ahead.
I'd like to have some questions on that.
Okay. So you'll remove number 4.
I'd like to, make a motion to approve item 3 consent agenda.
Is there a second? Okay, any discussion? Any public comment? I want to remind anyone who would like to make a public comment that you can press *9 or use the raise hand feature on Zoom. Okay, roll call please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein?
For the minutes,
Yes,
just,
I'm voting aye, but I wondered, do we still need to have roll call votes?
My recommendation is absolutely you should have a roll call.
Okay, I thought once we were off Zoom, we didn't need to do it anymore.
We still on
no,
record?
we've done it. They're still on Zoom hybrid.
Okay, I vote aye.
Director Bloom?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Aye.
Director Slaughter?
Fine.
Director Crawley?
All right, so that motion carries. So Chuck, do you want to,
Yeah, I have several questions that I'm sorry, I'm really finding. Building on these papers here. Let me ask,
Michelle, is Elaine promoted so he can speak to this?
yes, thank you.
I have one question on page 4 of 8 of this report. It's the capital management projects. And it shows that we're going to spend 5 million less than we planned, if I'm reading this correctly. And I was just curious why that was.
Good evening, directors. Can you hear me well?
Yes, thanks, Elaine.
Yeah, so basically for this one, this is only the estimate as of the time that I did the report. But this is just based on, whatever the current spending is. But I actually spoke with, John Hitchcock, which is our senior management analyst who actually handles our capital improvement project. So basically, based on the current estimates, we would actually spend around 2.4 million or 2.5 million for this fiscal year. And so it's not really like 1 million. So it's 2.4 million. And that's for like the projects that we currently have, and the rest would be carried over for the next fiscal year. Like, for example, the station rebuild, right? I think the estimate is, we would have a carryover funding for next year for 900,000. So these are like ongoing projects. So the estimated, cost is really just based on what will be done for this fiscal year, and the rest will be carried over in the next fiscal year.
So you're saying that it doesn't affect what projects we're doing or how much we're spending, it's just a matter of a cash flow in terms of when we pay the bills.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I thought maybe we had given up on a $5 million project. And then I want to ask you, please, on page 6 of 8. I want to ask you about the liquidity, or if you've looked into the liquidity of LAIF as an organization. I mean, basically, these deposits that we have with them are completely uninsured. And I remember all the agencies that lost money because of the failure of Lehman Brothers back in 2008 or whatever. Are you doing anything in terms of looking into LAIF's liquidity and where it has its investments and how secure our money is with LAIF?
Yeah, so basically for LAIF account, so I already had some discussions with the LAIF team as well, like some clarifications on the liquidity and the safety of, our investment. So basically what they actually told us is, whatever our investment is right now, including the interest, if we decided to, let's put it this way, like if we decided to actually withdraw all of them, like all at once, we can. So it's safe enough and it's liquid enough for us to actually withdraw all of the funds like all at the same time. And I think there has been a communication again with I'm no for sure you are already aware of what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. So they reassured us that our investment is safe and in their hands, and there would be no impacts on our investment when in relation to to what happened with the Silicon Valley Bank. So to answer your question, it's liquid and it's safe, and for now we have nothing to worry about.
Well,
Well, we're monitoring this, right? Because I've asked the
Can I-
county
can I- can I-
manager. Yeah, go ahead.
let me ask you, I mean, I'm just wondering if we would earn twice as much, I know we're gonna hire somebody and this and that, but it takes a long time. I wondered if we could get somebody short term, just like, this week. And talk to somebody about taking $50 million or something and buying treasury bills. We could buy 4-week treasury bills. They're totally secure. They're in our own name, even if they're held by Fidelity or whatever. We still have title to those and nobody can take that away from us. And, why not earn twice as much money and have much more safety? It just seems to me it would be a good idea to look into.
Yeah, that's probably going to be, a discussion, now that we are actually hiring an investment advisor. So that's going to be one of the discussions that, we can actually look into when we are actually doing, we're actually talking about, what our strategy would be in terms of, the investments, the allowable investments and the permitted investments that the district would, want to actually invest into. So that's going to be, something that, we would definitely talk with, the proposers or the top proposers in our RFP process, evaluation process. So that's going to be, something that we would, talk about.
Well, let me tell you something I know about, because I'm concerned about this with my own organization. We found out, we have big bank with one of those regional banks that's probably under concern right now. But they worked out this arrangement where every night they sweep up the money and they distribute it to a variety of banks up. They're insured up to the $250,000 limit. I mean, it would take a lot to put 50 million in. You'd need what, 200 accounts or something to get the full FDIC insurance. But there's arrangements we can make. I know we use Bank of America and so forth, and they're probably one of the strongest banks, but it might be worth talking to them about what kinds of safeguards they can provide you, or how you might be able to overnight put money in and again, earn more money than we're getting from Life anyway. Anyway, I'm just throwing out the idea because I think this is something that we shouldn't play with. This is a lot of money for the district, and I'm not confident that our banking system is secure as people are trying to make us believe it is.
Yeah, I appreciate, the idea, and we will definitely, look into ways or avenues where we can actually strengthen, the stability and liquidity of our investments, and not just investment, but the cash per se. So we will, consider, other approaches in dealing with that issue.
Thank you. And then I have one last kind of minor question on page 8 of 8. The prepaid apparatus that is still in there, is that the fire truck that's on order?
That was page 8 out of 8.
Yeah, it's under the capital reserve. It's the second to last item.
The 1.7.
Yes.
What?
Yes, that's correct. So basically, a part of this apparatus rolling stock is, I think we already received six new fire engines, but we're still waiting for the delivery of, the tiller truck that we purchased a few years back. So that's a portion of that, majority of the portion of that is that amount.
Okay, and I was gonna make a motion to approve.
Gary has
Go ahead, sorry.
comment.
No, it's really kind of a security report around the discussion you had about the security of our investments. And Elaine, I understand that they gave you assurances and, and you did contact them, which I think is great. I think the question I have is, did they provide you what their 1-day and 7-day liquidity percentages are for coverage of the money that they're holding? Because that's ultimately what the banks have been providing, and even within the banks, the individual funds is, do they have 100% coverage in one day? In other words, if 100% of the people came forward and said, I want my money back, do they have 100% of the capital available in a day? And then what is it at 7 days? And generally speaking, a lot of the banks did not have, and you wouldn't expect them to have 100% coverage for one day, but you would expect them to have 100% coverage at 7 days. And so I'm just curious whether, you know, besides the verbal assurances to you, did they provide you any kind of coverage data as to the liquidity of the funds they're holding?
Not that information was not provided, but definitely, you know, if that's something that, you know, the board would want to know, we would definitely take a look into that and, you know, reach out, you know, to the bank and to, of course, the treasurer's office for the LAIF account.
Yeah, and I think we should do it prior to just like, I think you should think about doing it for each of the accounts that we have, wherever we have money that is beyond, which I think is almost every location, beyond the insured amount, is to find out what, by the funds we're invested in or the sweep funds we're in, what their liquidity provisions are and what kind of coverage they have. It's very interesting when you look at a large bank, because they'll have some funds that are 100% on one day and 100% at 7. They'll have others that are like 42% in one day and only get to 67% at 7 days.
Yeah.
And so there's some specific measurable data that I think we should probably solicit, given the umbrella context of what transpired with Silicon Valley Bank, Credit Suisse, the concerns about about a public bank and so forth. But beyond that, I don't have any other comments on the management or treasury.
Oh, you have it.
For comment,
Yeah.
if I may. You mentioned about the, I guess, consultant, that you're hiring or looking at process to bring it, come on board soon. Is that
Investment
The
advisor.
the investment advisor?
Yes, so basically right now with the process, so we are finalizing the initial review of the RFP submissions or the proposals that were submitted to us. Tentatively, we will actually hold interviews for, you know, the top proposers, top 2 or 3 proposers in the first week of April, and hopefully we'll present, you know, all of the information or, you know, our recommendation to the finance committee and to the board in May, and then the contract hopefully would start probably by June.
So have you put together a list of questions and areas that you wanted to explore with them?
In terms of, you know, the RFP questions, we have a wide variety of questions, you know, that would address, you know, some of the issues that was just mentioned, and, you know, what would be the strategy, the investment approach, you know, of course, the experience of, you know, the firms that's going to handle, you know, our investments or going to manage our, you know, external investments. And, you know, with the concerns that, you know, the board brought up today, you know, of course, we would definitely consider that in, or maybe ask, you know, some of those questions in the upcoming interview for the top proposers.
Is it possible, and I hate to say this, but is it possible to send the board those listed areas in which you are looking to explore with this investment company, to make sure that, or to give us an opportunity kind of look at it and maybe add to, reflect on it, and then maybe there's some additional comments that we can provide to you.
Hey, Elaine, hang on before you answer. This is Steve, Director Jones. So this is an active procurement that's out on the street. That's going to eventually come to the board for approval. I think it's totally fine if you'd like to see a copy of that RFP.
That's all I'm asking for.
No problem at all, but if there's to sort of change some of the ground rules or opine on what part of the project, you know, I'd hate to make it difficult for you to have an opinion when it's time to award a contract.
Let me just put it this way, it would just kind of help me out here. part of concern that I've had as a board, been on this board, is that things are done. Decisions are made by one or two people. And the next thing you know, our RFP is out there. And next thing we know, we got someone, but yet still there are questions and concerns that some of the board members may have had or wanted to maybe include into that RFP. They never got in. So we end up getting this report based upon some, if there's been asked, information could have been given to them before they sent the RFP out, and then we all would have been happy at that point of what we saw, because we have no complaints about, oh, I didn't know what what went out there, or else I had another question. I'm just trying to avoid that situation, just the two comments that I made, and I think somebody else made regarding, have you thought about this, in terms of asking questions, and that's a matter of due diligence as a board, I think.
So,
I understand it's already out there.
so generally, I mean, going forward, if this board wants to have a policy that RFPs can't or should only be issued upon board approval, that would be a policy that the
That's
board
not what I'm
could
saying, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that opportunity to look at the ground rules in which are the questions, areas of exploration. I think the board should have a say, so we've been here, we talk about it, there's like today, we got two other areas that he wanted, oh, well, I'll look at, I'll include that into the question or the exploration. What I'm saying is if that's given to the board in enough advanced time, we can make those comments so that no one else, we can put that at rest for him at that point in time.
I totally get it. I thought I was being responsive to your question, which is the time for the board to have that input is before the RFP is issued on the street, not while there is an active procurement process. So my suggestion would be if there's concerns that RFPs don't respond to the needs of the board, the time for the board to exercise that oversight would be before an RFP is issued, not while there's an active procurement going on. That's what I was trying to
Help
say.
me with what that means in terms of active procurement process. I mean, what is involved in that? Maybe that's what we know.
So there's an RFP that has been issued. That RFP sets the ground rules for the procurement that the district and all the participants must comply with, so that everybody is competing on an even playing field and no one entity has any kind of unfair competitive advantage.
So the
And so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm being rude. Go ahead, finish.
So one of the sort of principles of a procurement process with integrity is that while a procurement process is active, two things. First, don't change the ground rules by adding new requirements, changing the requirements, adding new interview rules. So don't change the ground rules during the procurement. And the second would be that the board that's going to authorize the procurement needs, in order to preserve in the actuality or even just the appearance of an unbiased ability to select who you want to be the contractor, shouldn't get involved in the staff's running of the procurement, because it's sort of like being the judge and the jury at the same time. So the board should wait until the procurement process runs its course, and then you're free to award a contract or not award a contract.
I think that's where the issue really is. And it could be just my slowness in terms of understanding that process. Because what I'm talking about is that anytime something goes out, I think the board should have look at what those qualifications, I may say, criteria are before it gets out there, and get that particular sign off on the board before it goes. Now, and I understand now it's out there, I wouldn't want to change the rules of the game, because I wouldn't want people to do that to me. I get that part of it. But, so what I'm saying, the cows and horses are out of the barn now. And we can't do anything until it comes in and we inject every last one of them and then you go back out. That's the kind of thing that I want to try to avoid. That's what we have, I think, always had, since I've been here. What's been creating this struggle here, I think, in that process. So, forgive me if no reflection on anybody here. It's just one of the things that it seemed like, I thought it was clear in terms of, when we had the chiefs,
Right, when the job description.
but that didn't happen, so I'm hoping that our recommendation is that we kind of look at that as a, even if it's a policy that the board has to go to and adopt and say, this is what we're gonna do, it will help in that clarity. And so that we don't have this conversation.
And Director, if I could address it, I mean, I hear you loud and clear. That's something I think we can accommodate moving forward.
Yeah.
In this situation, I think we could share the RFP with the board to give them, at least you can have a level of comfort to see what is in it. And then let me just discuss briefly some of the process that we're gonna go through, which might give you another level of comfort. So, Elaine, Francine, and myself are all independently going through the 10 proposals and rating them. Tomorrow, we're gonna gather up and compare notes and select what we believe to be the top 3. And then for the interview process, the plan is to have Director Bloom off of the Finance Committee also participate in these to help us with that selection. So it's not perfect. The horse is out of the barn, but hopefully he's still in the corral. And moving forward, as we put out RFPs, we'll figure out a way to give the board some input and some basically daylight the RFP advance.
So Robert, maybe what we need to do is when we update our policies and procedures, I mean, every year we look at that, to review that we put that. I agree with Robert, by the way, as one of the potential policies that should be included in the policy manual.
I think from my experience over the last 5 years, it's really has been an issue for me, and it's been a lot of inconsistency. This would be for any of you have came on board, and before Steve got here, then there's a moment like that. But what I'm saying, it has been an issue, and it creates favoritism in some respects that we need to get rid of.
I agree.
And I'm not saying anybody in my professionalism, I'm not saying that at all. It's a process here on the board, and we kind of have.
You got me 2 comments.
Yeah.
So one comment, Robert, I really do agree with you that the board having the opportunity to have input into RFPs, et cetera, we see them beforehand makes sense. And, when that kind of process isn't followed, about the only recourse the board ultimately has is to just not accept the outcome of it, vote it down and restart the process, which is an unfortunate way to manage it. So I think a proactive approach to institute a better review process is the right answer. The second question I had was just for council, whether what the chief suggests, which it might be not an interview panel, is actually allowed or in violation. Based on what you just said, I heard that that's not possible.
Well, maybe especially mindful of the fact that you have a big agenda and it's like super late, maybe we could have this conversation offline. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine, but I also want to be mindful of the fact that the audit committee includes the finance committee. So there's precedent for having someone who is qualified to possibly be in the interview process, but yeah, that's all I.
We have to make sure that doesn't break the procurement process.
Yeah, rules, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
can I move that we approve the?
Well, I have a quick question for Elaine. Elaine, sorry. So the whole Silicon Valley banking, the banking industry in general, I think it's been such a difficult time. And I actually, I'm on the county treasurer's oversight committee, so I've asked, for example, the county treasurer to let me look at, well, it's on the website, the portfolio for the county. Do you have the latest portfolio holdings for Lake, especially since they should have probably done something by the end of last year? So there might be new holdings, or I don't even know. Do we know what the holdings are?
I think that's something that we can actually request for, because right now I think with the access that we have, I think we see, the yields, the returns, the market values overall. and the amortized cost for their investments, but I'm not sure if we actually have a report that, have the exact, holdings, like the portfolio holdings of, the LAIF account. But, probably that's something that I can, inquire about. But I'm right now, not to my knowledge, I don't think there is one, but I could be wrong. But that's something that I can take a look at.
I would suggest we try to get that if they have it. They've got to have something. If they've got return, they have to have holdings of some kind. I'd like to see what they are. Sometimes I think that investors don't look at the macro picture. Like with the Lehman Brothers thing, like with the county fund, they had Bear Stearns. And they divested Bear Stearns, but they kept all the Lehman Brothers in there, right? Which is what led to this horrible situation with Lehman Brothers at the county level. So just understanding just a macro picture of LAIF's holding for me would be kind of comforting.
Yeah, actually, with the market value statement that they are not market value statement, but with, the, again, the statement that they post on their website, there's actually like a list of, portfolio holdings in general. So there's this treasury bills, notes, and then the amounts, the accrued interest, fair value, and then the carrying cost of that. So if you're looking into, the categories or, the asset allocation of the portfolio, I think it is posted on the website as I can see right now. Yeah, so I think that's something that they provide. So are you looking into that type of, a report or statement? Like we have this, bills, notes, commercial papers, bonds, all of those investment categories.
Yeah, that's the okay, well, anyway.
Liquidity is more complicated than just what they're holding.
Exactly.
Because Silicon Valley Bank was holding the assets.
All of
The
it.
problem was
Getting out.
the price on those assets had declined dramatically in the marketplace. And then when there was a run on the bank, the more withdrawals that they could handle, they didn't have enough liquidity.
Yeah, that's
So the funds, and if they had another 5 years, the value of all those things might have recovered and they might have had 100%. But they did not have adequate 1 to 3 day liquidity for the investments they're holding in the bank collapsed.
Yeah, no, I get
Essentially, yeah, so I think it starts with the holdings, but I think you have to have both the holdings and then you have to understand, and they should be able to provide Elaine
That's
the
right.
liquidity statistics.
All of it.
If they're operating in the same context as, mutual funds and banks operate in,
Yeah.
I don't know what their governing structure is.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, thanks, Elaine.
Okay, I'll
What did y'all make the motion?
make the motion to accept the treasurer's report for the month ended January 31st, 2023.
Second.
Okay, any discussion or public comment? I don't see any hand raised. Michelle, roll call, please.
Director Bernstein?
Aye.
Director Bloom?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Yes.
Director Solana?
Aye.
Director Crawley?
Aye, so that motion carries. And we're moving on to our regular agenda, item 5, which is to accept the terms of the memorandum of understanding between the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME Local 829, and the Menlo Park Fire Protection District, and approve a resolution authorizing the fire chief to execute the MOU.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion?
Who seconded that?
Robert?
I did.
Oh, thank you.
Any public comment? I don't see any hands raised. Do you see? Okay. Okay, roll call, please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein?
Aye.
Director Bloom?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Aye.
Director Solana?
Aye.
Director Crawley?
Aye, so that motion carries as well. And we'll move to item 6, which is to adopt a resolution approving the master pay schedule for all district employees. Chief.
I'll let Francine take it. It really goes hand in hand with what you just heard.
Yeah,
So typically, so typically this is on the consent calendar and we pulled it off the consent and put it after because we wanted to include the ASME changes as well. And so this one is a little bit more comprehensive. So the changes on this master pay schedule will include the ASME wage adjustments. It will also include The adjustments will be made to right size the salary ranges for the chief officers and the represented classifications that are listed on the table, as well as an equity adjustment for the fire prevention coordinator classification that assumes greater duties of the board also already approved. So this is just memorializing all of those changes as required under the protocol.
Any comments or questions? Ron?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution approving the master pay schedule for all district employees.
Is there a second? Okay, any further discussion? I don't see public hands up for public comment. You see, great, then roll call, please.
Director Bernstein?
Aye.
Director Bloom?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Aye.
Director Solana?
Aye.
Director Crawley?
Aye. So that motion carries. So item number 7 is something that I really, it's not in here.
There's no step.
Yeah, no, there's no staff report technically speaking, but basically, let me give you the background, because I'm the LAFCO liaison, and it looks like there will be a vacancy for a special district seat for the LAFCO commission, the Strong LAFCO commission. And I don't know when the process is gonna start. I've been talking to our LAFCO, the head of LAFCO in San Mateo County, and he's going to give us details. But I have an interest in being the special district representative for LAFCO, which means that all of the special districts will vote for that vacancy once it's officially called. So I just wanted to give that update, and I don't know if you want to, there's really no, there's no approval that needs to happen today until we understand the process, or if we want to just say, oh, Virginia, we will nominate you to be the LAFCO representative for the special district, we can do that today too.
Well, can we make more our?
I know LAFCO, yeah, you can't, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, why don't we just do that? Can we
Do you
make a
wanna
motion on this, Steve?
Sure, but I believe there will be a formalized LAFCO nomination process where they will send a district a little form where you
Yeah.
pick, right, your selected person and your second choice or third choice, even if you wanted one, there will be a time when there is a process. I suppose if you want to tonight say, if there ever is such a process in the future, don't want to learn about it then, we're gonna just tell Virginia now.
Yeah, that's what
Let's do that.
Good question, is this, should this position be tied into the position on the board? In terms of president or vice president wants to come?
No, it has to do with just the governing board, which are 7 members. There's your 7 members and
from the city.
some are citizens,
County,
some are.
and they are the elected representatives, all the respective special district boards.
If I have understood it correctly, there is a seat on that board for a special district representative.
Yes.
And there'll be nominees from multiple special
Yeah.
districts, of which one will be elected. And what you're proposing, a UPR nominee,
Yes.
and I'm fine with that.
My memory, I could be wrong, is that there is a packet that gets sent out, which includes a resolution required to be adopted by the governing body of the
We
nominating
can
committee.
wait,
So it feels just a little bit like maybe this is premature.
okay,
You may take action now and you'll have to do it again later because there will be some process that we didn't follow tonight.
that's.
And we don't know how many special district nominees are going to be for that one seat, do we?
I don't know now, because they haven't sent out everything,
Exactly.
but I know that I'm gonna go for it.
Good luck.
I think directionally we know where we're going, but it
Yeah,
sounds
but
like
we'll
action would be premature.
Yeah, we can, it doesn't matter to me, I just wanna put this out there.
Yeah.
So that everyone knows that this is happening.
I think you can just go to the meeting and say you're interested.
Anyway, okay, so we'll wait until, yeah, there is a nomination process, but anyway, so I just wanted to put this out there because it is coming up. Okay, so we're on item 8, which is to adopt the board goals, set the schedule for a periodic review, and establish a year-end review in December. So, Jerry, thank you for doing all of this and organizing this for us. You want to go to the?
Yeah, so we should take it one at a time. As far as adopting the board goals, there is a couple changes that I would like to propose to make based on a discussion with the chief. And
Changes to what we're looking at.
changes to what you're looking at, yeah, so that when we adopt it, we're adopting it with the changes. And I'll be very specific about the changes so that there won't be any confusion on it. Essentially, the chief and I were talking about clarification on 5.2 and 5.4 specifically regarding the process. And so the suggestion on 5.2 was to clarify the advised, the not approval, but input, to be a little bit more specific than that, so that it does not impede the chief's process or timeliness of his processes for hiring. And so what the new wording would be for 5.2 to replace the existing wording would be the chief to socialize proposed candidates and promotions for key leadership roles with board members prior to the formal offer of employment.
One more time.
So chief to socialize proposed candidates and promotions for key leadership roles with board members prior to the formal offer of employment. So what that means is that likely within the 1 to 2 week window prior to the time that he's going to make a formal offer, he would reach out to board members and discuss his plan for that particular position and give the board members the opportunity to make comments to them. So that the board would have something to put in the process.
What does it mean to socialize?
What I just said, which is in the 1 to 2 weeks prior, he would reach out to each board member individually, share his candidate that he is choosing and why, and give the board member the opportunity to comment.
But each board member would be individually with the person?
Yeah,
Is that-
and yeah, yes, so it would be individually. I think what we have to be careful of is we can't really have a group scenario where, because we'd then be exposing all the candidates, we'd be exposing the person that the board said no, that didn't get the position. And so in order to maintain the confidentiality of the candidates, and for us not to overstep our boundaries of approving the candidates that she's hiring, is to give the board the opportunity to comment on his selection process and comment on the selection that he's recommending, and for him to consider the board's input and make a final decision, knowing what the board thinks.
Just for, what is a key appointment definition?
Yeah, so that, what the chief and I discussed there was his direct reports and suppression staff above the battalion chief level.
Okay.
In administration.
Well, it's above direct reports
Oh, yeah.
of the chief
Okay, got it.
and suppression staff above the battalion chief level.
Okay.
And just for clarification for Director Bercy's question, so it sounds like you had asked if you were going to be interviewing for the individual candidates. That's not the intent, but it is to share with you a name, especially if it's an internal person, and give you the opportunity to ask directly, why, or give your thoughts if you have experience with that person. So you have the opportunity to provide you with some feedback and input on it or not, and it will be, as I've talked with Steve about this, trying to make sure that we honor the Brown Act. It will be individual comments. I won't share other board members' comments, and so that'll be the process. And then for, the key level things, it's everybody on my executive staff team, which is all the division chiefs, the deputy chief, and currently the administrative services director.
So it's not to meet, and I'm not.
No, it's
I'm
not
not
to meet
supporting
the
one part or the other, here, but it's not to meet the candidate, it's to meet with you. And discuss the candidate.
Sure.
Yeah, before the final decision's released.
It's like, it seems like socialized, I don't know what that word really means in this context, but that doesn't seem like the right word.
You want to put the word review?
Or discussed or something,
Well, let me read it one more time and see if it covers it, because it can be review or socialize. Chief to socialize proposed candidates and promotions for key leadership roles with board members prior to the formal offer of employment.
Discussion review.
Good language. Review is fine with me. I think reviews might be a little bit quiet. Yeah, so I can read it with the word review. Chief to review proposed candidates and promotions for key leadership roles with board members prior to the formal offer of employment. What we're trying to address, the chief and I had a long discussion about this, is the notion that when announcements are made, the way it's currently working is the board is typically notified by the chief that says, I just put out an email announcing so-and-so has the following position. And then the board's left feeling like, well, we didn't even really get to have any input in it. We didn't know it was coming and so forth. So it's not trying to change the process and put a new approval process in for the chief and slow down this process. It's trying to address the very specific thing that the board members raised that says the board would like an interaction with the chief about his candidate before he announces it. Give the board members an opportunity to provide their input and point of view. Let the chief make his final decision, knowing what the board members believe or think.
Yeah, I agree with Gary. on
So if we're done with that one, with the word review,
that.
so everyone okay with that change?
You look like you have a comment, Chuck.
No, I think, I thought socialize means introduce somebody.
No,
Oh,
yeah,
no, yes, I.
okay. No, it's fine. I'm trying to get it right. I'm not trying to jam wording down anybody's throat. So,
these finalized, right?
well, we're gonna.
Yeah, these are- they're really the only
This is
two
the
things.
wording, and then the second change was on 5.4. Which the way it was currently written is, we didn't really define what report means. And then there is a concern that the chief raised about ensuring departing employees have confidential treatment of their exit interviews, which practically speaking is necessary for employees to feel comfortable giving an exit interview. And if he was to issue a full-fledged report of all the exit interviews or include them all in that scenario, subject to the Brown Act, they'd be public information. And we'd lose all the confidentiality, the likelihood that employees would be forthcoming if they believe their exit interviews would be posted on the website in minutes is very unlikely. And so to try to address that, what we came up with was, instead of for 5.4 to replace the existing wording, was chief to provide a verbal update to the board on a quarterly basis of key themes that were raised during exit interviews of employees departing the district. And our expectation is the chief would just add this to the chief's report 4 times a year. And he would comment about, here are the things we are hearing in exit interviews from our employees. No different than really what the management audit came up with from their interviews of, we talked to a lot of people and here's the things that we heard back.
It's mostly evaluation tool for the chief and his senior staff. It's really
Yeah.
at our level.
Well, it's making sure that the board, what the board wanted to hear, which was some of the, what are you hearing on these things? Doesn't negate his ability to effectively do that process,
Right.
which making them public would negate it. So,
It should be his.
yeah.
Any questions?
I
Chuck?
wanted to ask a question of Steve. Steve, with the substance of an exit interview, and I'm not proposing this, I'm just, is that something that could be discussed in closed session, or is that doesn't qualify for a closed session discussion?
I'm not trying to be difficult, but it's really almost impossible to answer that question at that level of generality. If someone in an exit interview says, I'm gonna sue the district for $1 million because of X, Y, or Z, that would be something that we could discuss in closed session. If there's someone in an exit interview that you didn't give me enough lollipops and I would have had a better work life if I had more lollipops, that's probably not something you could talk about in closed session. I'd have to know more specific.
This is what we're trying to navigate, is an ability for the board to hear the key themes
Well, I don't
without
know. I
creating.
don't have a problem. I can see how it works and then discuss it later if we think there will be a change.
As long as the chief gets the information.
So what we need to finish this process is,
With this, we would be requiring the chief to give us that information.
Yeah, no, we're good.
so what we need at this stage is somebody to propose that we adopt the goals as stated in the agenda with the 2 changes that were articulated here.
Okay, well, Robert has some comments. Good question.
Just one
Sure.
comment, and I noticed in number 6, you integrate DEI and mental health. And I think those are 2 distinct separations, and in terms of, activity and work. So, because when it's combined like this, that means that the work itself will be focusing on both. But I think they really need to have their own separate identity.
I would agree with
So
that.
we can make that number 6 and number 7,
Seven, yeah.
Right.
and I'm fine with that. I don't have any issues about it. It's working efficiency, so
Yeah,
that's fine.
but I mean, I see that.
They get tracked separately. They're separate goals, so they'd be tracked separately, so that's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah, so make that 6 and 7.
I'm okay if you make a motion on what,
and then 7 mental health awareness and services.
Yeah.
So it'd be improve DEI services within the fire district
Yeah,
and improve mental health awareness within the fire district.
that's cool.
okay.
The other one is the thing I have is a process issue, but we can approve it and then go through the process. Part of that.
Okay, well, what is the process going to affect your people?
No, it doesn't. It's just a matter of as a board, it's fine then we got all of this somewhere. I think it has to be prioritized because we can't do everything at once. And the second thing is, I think from that, how then how does the work actually get done? It does it stay as a board as a whole, we get to put it on an agenda every month, or do we break it down into the committees that we have? And then have the committee dig the work out, the areas that we need to kind of really focus on, and then bring that back to the board for.
Yes.
So
So I'm only laughing a little bit because I had this broken down to 3 items to cover that very specifically separately from this. And we were encouraged to combine them, we did. So there was a second part of item 8, which was set the schedule for the periodic review and establish a year-end review in December, which I was going to address separately.
I mean,
I can give you and share some thoughts on it, but not necessarily establish the process.
yeah, well, we don't have to, I just, as long as you got the thought going, we can address it in the next week or next month or whatever, but to me, it's not it's not complete until we have.
I agree with you. I think step 1 is you adopt the goals and step 2 and 3 is what are you going to do with them?
Or
And
how
how do you measure it?
How do
So-
you divvy up?
Yeah,
The work.
yeah. So what I'm trying to do is just get through step 1.
Approve the goal.
Approve the goals, get it on the table, and then we'll work it.
You have 3 edits here, so you've got, okay.
I will.
So
Get them
you're
all.
gonna make the motion, Roger?
Yeah, I make a motion to accept,
Adopt.
adopt the board goals that is outlined in our report. With the addition of separating, fixed and which is, improve, DEI. And then 7 would be, what was the language on?
Improve mental health.
Improve mental health awareness, and services within the fire district.
And
And
the
they
2
changes to 5.2 and 5.4.
5.2, 5.4.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Somebody that can do it. You wrote it.
I'll second.
I know, Gary might get second. Okay, so Michelle is moved by Robert and seconded by Rob. So, any other discussion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solana,
Aye.
Director Crowley.
Aye. So that motion carries.
Okay, and then relative to the second part of the item 8 there, set the schedule for the periodic review, establish year-end review. That's kind of work in progress, Roger, that's responsive to your question. I would recommend we table that for tonight. And come back and put that back on the agenda and agree on the review process and periodic review, but it contemplated that we will have review processes and then also contemplated that we'll have the carryover discussion in the December meeting about what was left over
Right.
to be carried forward to the next year. That was your prior suggestion.
So I think any staff report that's put together, that should outline that process.
Yeah.
Or you can just look at it and.
I plan to work with the chief and come up with a process that makes sense.
But we should also discuss, how we're gonna
Yeah,
figure out who takes what.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting time because we have kind of 3 converging sets of goals now. You've got the management audit report. And the chiefs could do here's what I'm planning to address from
Right.
that, which will overlap with some of these. We have the chief strategic goals, which also overlap with some of these. And then some of these are directly related to things the board needs to drive and make happen.
Right.
And so I'll work with the chief and make sure that we converge all these things into an actionable plan. If the board is okay with that.
I want to try to say. I think reading this, what you said. But it seems, for example, that like page number 2, which relates to emergency preparedness, it seems to me that maybe the committee chairs could be empowered to just take on some of these things at their next meeting.
Well, I think a lot of these are in progress already.
Yeah.
And I think you're correct. Jeff, that we just want to continue with that process. And for me, emergency prep, these are 4 primary goals for emergency prep to be helping
I
guide.
just wouldn't want anybody bent out of shape because we jumped the gun or
Yeah.
something.
Right. Or we can't do anything because.
Because we haven't got an official plan, yeah.
Well, I won't jump, I mean, I already had it out on what meeting is what, so I'm
Right.
waiting till we get to that part. But I can- It won't be tonight.
Doing too much, I don't think anybody will object to.
Well, I think a lot, like you said, Gary, a lot of this is in the work, so. But that means if it's in the work, don't stop the work. Okay, so thank you, Gary. Thank you, Chief, for working with.
That's been great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're on to.
And the established year in review is tabled all.
Yeah, but the last 2, set scheduled for periodic review and established year in review in December. So we'll put that on, April agenda. I mean, we're gonna, if you have a special meeting to talk about everything, we could theoretically put the board goals on that.
Yeah, too much now.
I know, so we'll see what the special meeting people require. Okay, reports and requests, committee reports, emergency preparedness.
I feel like I'm talking too much.
No, you're not.
Especially for 10:49 PM. So the committee did meet, we had our initial meeting. We talked about the whole organizational structure, and some of the organizational structure touched on some of what the management audit touched on, which was about overall life cycle risk reduction. And Chief Johnson talked about how he's doing the broader scope of risk reduction. And then how does that apply to how we prepare the community to it? So kind of work in progress, lots of discussion there. We did discuss options for improving district-wide disaster communications, and more specifically to one of the questions about, do we understand how we could put out an alert or an SMC notice? We discussed having staff actually confirm what the rules are and what the processes would be, for us to be able to issue direct alerts from the fire district. Because right now the rules and how everything works isn't fully understood. So we encouraged staff to take up that task of understanding how all that works. The next item was soliciting input from leaders of various community disaster groups in the district. We talked about aligning kind of a study session with community members. We have not put that together as of yet. We felt that it was important to wait for the onboarding process of our new community volunteer leader. And then that person would be the staff person that helps put together the study session. I only have one question for the board on that, was whether the board would like to do that as a board discussion, or if the board's comfortable retaining that in the committee to meet with community volunteers and the community leader and hear their input.
Did y'all even discuss that in Chuck?
We did not drive a conclusion to it. It was,
We thought the whole board might want to hear
Yeah.
this.
I think maybe.
yeah, it was Chuck's suggestion that the board may want to, and so the only way I can answer that question is to ask the board.
Yeah, what
So,
do you think?
Chuck and I are comfortable either way.
Ron?
Well, the question is, do you want to be in the meeting when community volunteers talk about what their needs are, or should it be done at the committee level?
I'd like to hear.
So maybe the full board, I
Okay.
think so, because
So what
it's
would
been such a big issue for many years. And we've had multiple directors involved with E-Prep, the E-Prep committee over different years, so.
Yeah, that's why we were asking the question. So we'll work with the chief and staff and the new volunteer coordinator to find a time, and put that on the agenda and align that for the board meeting. And the last one is we just discussed community readiness as it related to the recent power outages and wind events. The chief has covered that. And we didn't have any specific follow-up on that topic. And I turned to Director Bernstein to see if I missed anything.
Well, there was only one thing, I think, and that was we were gonna talk to our attorney also to see how we would do that study session. Just to be able to get the input and have some sort of back and forth.
Yeah, it'll be different now that we're gonna do it as a board
Yeah,
session, so
yeah.
we will circle up with council as we come up with a plan, make sure we do it correct.
In the scheduling and in the timing of when the new staff member. gets
Yeah,
on board.
it's tied to the new onboard, the new staff member,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
We want
When
to have a
does
staff
that
person
person
start.
start? When does she start?
Yeah.
April 3rd or 4th, I think. Soon. Yeah, really soon. So it'll be, yeah,
Yeah,
it'll be nice to onboard her before we overwhelm her with
yeah,
a
with all
special
of the,
meeting. where she's,
it's with the community.
center of
the April board meeting would be, the April board member would be short of notice.
So we
Yeah,
throw it-
the community volunteers in.
Well, so maybe we'll just take your lead and the chief's lead in terms of the
Sure.
appropriate
We'll
time.
pick
Yeah, the
Yeah.
committee will work with the chief back with the study session. That's the extent of the report, unless Chuck, anything else?
No.
HR. Maybe.
Right.
I was, sorry, I was flying back, I'm sorry, but we will. Finance, Rob?
Yeah, finance, we met, Gary and I, we went through the district fund balance classifications and we got a clarification with the, workman's comp where we're self-insured, we have a reserve liability and, some of the overtime for some of the FEMA deployments and the backfill positions were fully compensated by FEMA, by the government. And, everything else we went over.
And approved.
Great. That's all I have.
So I only had one other addition,
Oh, go ahead.
if you don't mind.
No.
We did request that the finance group provide a capital report to the board that outlines our unfunded commitments for capital and then also looks to estimate what the expectation is for major known capital projects in the future, so that we can, for planning purposes, with the theory being that if you look at the number that's there, I think it's 37 million or something, you think, well, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But most of that money is fully committed, and then there's projects well beyond that that are not funded in the capital. So they're going to prepare a capital report, so we have better visibility to the longer range capital planning for the district.
Any questions, Chuck? Okay. Okay, liaison reports. Tell them about first.
So I will keep this very short. So predominantly, they continue to talk a lot about the housing element and going back and forth between their discussion about the ADUs and whether the ADUs are adequate or not. They then went through a full kind of secondary cycle based on a housing coalition letter that they got and reevaluated some of those, and they now have some interested residents in developing properties along El Camino Real. And they did bring up again the fire district property, and they kind of moved on past that on the basis of they're waiting for their last submission to the state before they really, formally pursue new ideas. And they would like the fire district to meet as a board and come back and let them know in general, kind of what we're planning for the property. But as of right now, they've excluded the property from any of their discussions because it's not property that they own or control. But there's a desire that's been articulated on their part for us to discuss our plans for the property, which may or may not be conclusive.
Right, so that's been in the press,
Yeah,
right, so it's.
not sharing anything that's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a public meeting. I attended the meeting and it was It was a long discussion.
It just seemed to be like a surprise that they hadn't really discussed this with you. Well, maybe.
Well, no, they commented that they had discussed, the town manager had discussed it with the chief
Okay.
at a very high level. And that there was some discussion between you, yourself and the
Yeah,
mayor.
or
you know,
about workforce housing, which I
Yeah,
think
which
was
was-
been my decision.
which was workforce housing related. Yeah, they're looking at it and saying workforce housing may be the ultimate use of that property. But if we know we're doing workforce housing, they can include that in some of their counts.
Yeah.
The reality is, it's a rounding error on the numbers that they have to achieve. Because we're not talking about that big of a property,
Right.
unless we were to put up a 20-story tower and has the entire fire district in it.
Which won't be approved until they're back.
Yeah.
We wanted, they did.
Yeah, so the only request out of the after the liaison report was that we, the board consider putting it on the agenda to discuss.
Okay, so do you want to put that on?
I'm passing the request on.
Okay.
So,
Okay. East Palo Alto, thanks, Gary.
sure.
Oh,
Sorry, what?
Late for daydreaming. Wait another hour. Probably not sleep with strategic goals.
Quickly, I had an opportunity to meet with Obsidian at a council meeting, a special meeting they had last week. I think he was on that call for a minute, and I think John was there too. They brought in elected officials, Slocum, what's the gentleman in Diane Pappin, the mayor, and there was another person there.
The chief Cosgrave from the county.
The county DM, as well as the vice president of PG&E, one of the vice presidents of PG&E. The main focus was around power outages that took place both in, I guess, Belhaven area, of course, parts of Belhaven, most of East Palo Alto, and the PG&E representative came and told the community how things got fixed and how they were working on it. And the meeting kind of got a little testy there for a moment because there was residents that didn't believe him and felt very betrayed by PG&E. And so that kind of settled. But the outcome, it seemed positive that, between what the city, the mayor and other representatives that were there, felt like that what could be, achieved, hopefully relying on PG&E to hold true to their word. But today, I will, around when the windstorm came, my power went out again, so that situation did not get fixed the way it should have, and whether it will, who knows, so hopefully everybody left there with the next step, we'll see how it worked out, so. And that's pretty much it, he fell out, though, Virginia was there, she got up there representing the president of the board, and given her thoughts of how that went, so I don't know.
We'll talk about that in the presentation.
Okay, I'll just leave that in a moment, so that's it.
Thanks, Robert. City of Menlo Park, Chuck.
Yeah, I attended a meeting similar to the one Robert just described. I didn't attend the meeting. I watched, I was working, it was during the day, so I watched it that evening. Not very many people showed up. I think it was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or something. I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 people there. Everybody was very polite, but some people had no power for 3 days. The PG&E was saying it was gonna come on at 10 or 11 that night. And everybody seemed fairly content. The city had just announced finally, after 3 days, they had opened the library as a warming shelter. And some people said, gosh, if it doesn't come on till later, can we keep it open later? But Emma Park said, well, it's too late to plan for it to be open for tonight, so we didn't keep it open. So I was probably disgusted with the whole thing, but again, it was very civil and very polite, and nobody had any issues or anything. PG&E wasn't there, and that was the end of it.
Was that the meeting that they approved the vouchers for hotels? Was that?
No, they'd already announced that they would do that, but again, it was too late. They announced it that morning.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, the power was supposed to come on that night, so it was too late for anybody to go somewhere. I don't know,
Chuck. Rob, San Mateo.
Yeah, I also attended the EPA community meeting at the request of Lawrence Slocum. And what I found out through the county, that the power company, I was moved by some of the people that went to the podium that had health issues and they weren't taken care of. So I contacted the Department of Emergency Management for the county and found out that they had signed off on an NDA where they could get information from PG&E and pass it on to cities and counties, but not special districts. Yeah,
So we wanted.
we are not part of it supposedly, but that's why we have legal counsel.
You giving that to?
I have the form, from the chief, because I think it's pertinent information that we should have as a fire district to find out where these people that need the additional help, either, with the power, and then the Senate bill that gives the cities and county, unfortunately not us, if you read the bill, that with the NDA, the cities and counties can get the information from PG&E and then respond accordingly and help these people. So if you could pass that to the chief and to Steve.
Wow.
So, thank you. That's all I got to do.
Okay, I'm gonna do the president.
Where did you get that from? Where did you get that from? What department?
Then too.
I got that from
Oh,
PG&E
sorry, Rob.
and county DM Don McKay.
The Department of Emergency Management.
Don McKay
To run.
signed that. So the county's got the information. No, they signed it for the county. Yeah, not for, they can't sign it. for it.
No, but it didn't include that.
No, because it's not in the bill.
Oh my God. Okay, hospital, ALS, JPA, nothing. Yeah, I haven't had it.
There's supposed to be one in May, right? I mean, if they have a quorum.
Yeah.
I'm here to serve.
That's right. Okay, so, really quickly for the president's report.
Reports requested.
Reports and requests for directors. So we had a request to put the housing issue from Atherton on a future agenda item. So I thought we approved like a standing item, a standing
You
item.
did not get my email then.
Sent an email, so there was accidental admission of that in this.
Oh, got it, okay, so sorry, did not see it, I didn't see it. Anyway, okay, so future agenda item, the Atherton housing issue, I want to put that on there.
Can I ask a question? real
Yeah.
quick? Specifically, you're talking about our property as part of their housing, is that?
Yeah, so for the board to discuss whether the board has any interest.
What do we want to do with it?
Okay, but not for housing in general.
We're not going to cover their housing element, but it's the last thing we want to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Station three.
Twist my arm, that's enough.
Robert, did you have any?
No.
Chuck, Rob, okay, so just that one.
For requests reports from everybody.
Yeah, okay. Okay, now quick president's report. I also attended the meeting, the community meeting to discuss the power outage in East Palo Alto. So thank you, Robert Jones and Rod Solano, both directors were there. And I also want to give a special shout out to Steve Souza. So I asked the chief if we could have a presence there, because I felt that the residents, and they did feel like we were helping them and that we were there, that it was important for them to see that their emergency responders were in support of their community. So I did speak on behalf of the board as the board president. One of the main issues that came up was about preparedness, community preparedness. And Isaac Stevenson, and I think you also mentioned that, you know, there are opportunities with the CERT program and, you know, to get involved locally in East Palo Alto with REPAC, that, that those opportunities were available. So hopefully we'll see an increase in community involvement there. Oh, good. Okay, that's great. Because there's definitely interest. And I also mentioned that we would definitely be scheduling these joint meetings, and that one of the main items on the agenda will be about community preparedness, because as Rob and Robert both said, I was moved to by a lot of the public comments that were made. They probably had like, how many hours? Almost 2 hours of public comment.
After it got a little rowdy, I left.
Yeah, I know. Well, the meeting ended, it was supposed to end at 6:30 and it ended at 2:20. But in any case, I think that, that when I kind of gave a quick update on what the fire district has done by providing generators to the library, and, you know, people were very comforted in knowing that we were there in support of them. Also, let's see, the Peninsula Volunteers, I got that email too, so things were doing their one-on-one for Meals on Wheels. But I want to just announce, not that anyone's going to hear this, but I hope they do that. The Peninsula Volunteers are providing free transportation services for seniors in all of San Mateo County except the South Coast and Pescadero. So anyone who needs a ride, you know, can call them. And I've been working with John Johnston on getting that on the social media as well. So I've got to finish that. And then I don't know if anyone got the National CERT email, that conference. Did y'all get that?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's something that, are we participating in something like that? It's in Burlingame at the end of June.
Yes, so I know we're sending some of our staff to it.
Okay, so is that something that our CERTs could also do?
I would imagine, yeah, we can share that information.
I would, yeah, because it's local, right? Technically, it's in Burlingame.
Also look for volunteers as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a
Got
good
an
idea.
email for that, you know, if you volunteer, about, you know, 4-day volunteer, you can go in and participate in the first half, just training, I think that's 3 days, or you can participate in the latter half, which is the presentations, and they'll pay for all that. You're sort of volunteer.
So yeah, you can put that out, that would be great, and also get it out to MPC and REPAC and ADAP, that would be really good too. So I mean, that's all I
Yeah, they even-
have, but you have a question?
It's a real gas thing.
Not
I feel it affects Steve. Do you do 101 North? I got a SMC alert that 101 is closed in both directions, so bring lost to the Hillsdale.
Your Belmont and San
I'm
Diego.
sorry, that's not on the agenda. We can't really
I know.
discuss this right now.
I just wanted you to know.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, so that's all I've got, and I will open up our meeting to public comment number 2. I don't see any hands raised, do you? Okay, I'll close public comment number 2, and next we will adjourn this meeting. 11:11.
I'm sure we were training past then.
No.
Yeah.
That's